Livewell. We appreciate your time, and I've got an absolutely fantastic show for you guys tonight. Striper redo, is that how you said it, Paul?
Redux.
The Redux. That must be Cajun or something like that. But anyway, I've got more talent assembled around me than I do on most nights like that. So we've got the absolute best of the best, in my opinion, around here. I don't think anybody will argue that. I'm going to introduce all our guests here in a little bit. But again, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button and click that notification bell. You'll be surprised at how much that helps us when you do that. And again, if you're watching on Facebook, make sure you join that in the Facebook group page, Instagram, Twitter, all our regular handles. And again, check out our Patreon where Ryan gives in-depth fishing lessons right there. Patreon at Fish North Georgia, and subscribe right there. So we're going to be talking about stripers, okay? We all know them. You either love them or you hate them, but I think I'm finding out a lot more people love them than hate them right there. And so these guys that are surrounding me are some of the best around, some of the best around in North Georgia to do that. And we're going to start introducing them right now. We'll start. You want to pull up Mr. Henry Cowan there?
Let's do it.
Let's push. There's Mr. Henry Cowan. Henry, tell us a little bit about yourself, sir.
Well, I'm an original. I was born in Conyers, Georgia. You can tell by my accent.
Yep.
So
that's right. That's right. You're one of my favorite Yankees.
It's a little thicker than Terry's accent, just a tad. No,
just a bit.
I was born in Brooklyn, New York, and moved down here in '97, and had been striper fishing the entire saltwater mid-Atlantic through New England from basically the mid 70s till I moved down here in 97, and then still go back up there and started fishing Lake Lanier about 97. And by 2000, I was asked to start guiding. And now I'm a striper guide, a fly fishing striper guide on Lake Lanier. And I also do some guiding on Lake Altoona over the summer for hybrids. And I also do, believe it or not, the most challenging fish on a fly rod in freshwater, which is the carp. I do that in the summertime as well. And we dabble, believe it or not, I dabble with green fish as well in the months of June and July.
That's right. I remember you've got a couple of clients that's got some line records for spotted bass on your resume. That's right. We might bring that up.
Yep.
That's right. So that's Mr. Henry Cowan. He's in the fly fishing world. World famous is what I like to say. To my left, I got Jeremy Mullinax. Jeremy, introduce yourself a little bit there, buddy.
Yeah, I'm Jeremy Mullinax with Backwoods Fishing Guide. And just like Henry was talking about Lake Lanier, I grew up fishing on Lake Lanier, but I have kind of moved my guide service and everything focus on Carter's Lake and Lake Notley now. So that's kind of what we're doing. And we go fish some tournaments with Terry every once in a while and get our butt kicked.
That's right.
But that's pretty much it.
Okay. All right. And to my right first, Mr. Terry.
Terry O'Shaughnessy, originally from New Jersey, moved down here back in the mid-2000s. Started fishing for stripers in the late 90s in the Delaware River, South Trenton area, tidal water. Moved down here, landed on Lake Lanier, realized it was a whole different game. Like a completely different game than catching them in the rivers in New Jersey, and really put my nose to the grindstone and figured out how to catch them on artificial, mostly at night and during the day. And, I pretty much, if there's a way to catch them, I do it, whether it's live bait, artificial, everything.
Okay, good. Excellent. All right. And at the end, Mr. Alex Green.
Hey there, I'm Alex, Alex Green Fishing on Instagram, and I am from here, Gwinnett County, born and raised. For better or worse.
For better or for worse.
For better or for worse. So grew up fishing the Chattahoochee. I was primarily a trout guy, actually, growing up and through my early 20s. And then I found religion when a striper destroyed a trout that was coming to the boat. Right. So I need to figure out how these things are caught.
Right,
and, the rest is kind of history.
I got it. So as you can tell, I'm surrounded. I'm whistling when I'm talking tonight. I don't know what's up with that, but surrounded by a lot of great guys, got a lot of great information. And we're going to, Henry was very gracious enough to give me a kind of a primer list that we're going to go over. And so hopefully tonight you can take some of this information, or again, if you're listening later on Spotify or iTunes, you can take some of this information, put it to use, and increase your catches with stripers. Now, we got to take care of some business. This first section of the show is brought to you by For Her Outdoor Apparel. Miss Jennifer and the lovely ladies over there at For Her. Listen, go check them out at forheroutdoor.com. All right. Don't let the name fool you. They got a lot of great stuff, a lot of great apparel that's geared towards the women in your lives. We want to get them out in the outdoors fishing and all that, but they got a lot of stuff that guys can wear too. And so definitely it's a great local company that deserves your support. So go to forheroutdoor.com and check it all out and buy you some stuff. I own several of the sweatshirts and I love them, everything. So great people. And also, I believe it's, Paul, correct me if I'm wrong, April 22nd, I believe that's the date, Mary Alice Park, Lake Lanier. We've got the women's clinic. And I know there's a nicer name for that. And right now it's slipping my brain. But there, do we have that? Do we have that ticker?
Oh, give me just a
You
second. I don't
just
know if we
say,
have a ticker for that.
I don't know if we have a ticker. But anyway, listen, April 22nd, mark it down at Mary Alice Park. So this clinic is designed to get women and children into the sport of fishing.
That would be the Let's Go Fishing Free Fundamentals of Fishing Clinic for Women and Children.
There you go.
Saturday, April 22nd from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. presented by For Her Outdoors in Fish North, Georgia. You can pre-register for that event on eventbrite.com.
That's what I'm saying. He's got a face for radio, but man, look at that
Each registered participant will receive a rod and reel, a tackle box, a t-shirt, and a free lunch cooked by who, Danny?
By me.
I don't know how Danny got through all that without moving his lips.
Yeah, I know. It's amazing, Henry. We're sitting here thinking, I'm like, I thought I was at home watching Wheel of Fortune or something like that, listening to Paul talking all that.
Show him what he's won.
There you go. So that is awesome. So, but
Give
again,
us the Price is Right, Paul.
Yeah, that's it. We definitely want to try to get the women and children in your lives registered. They all get every participant that's registered gets a rod, a reel, a tackle box. They're going to get a t-shirt, and of course, lunch is going to be provided. But the cool thing is, we're going to have instructors there that's going to, kind of go through the motions and teach the basics and fundamentals of fishing. So it's going to be a great thing. And again, For Her Outdoors is putting that on. They are the major sponsor with that. So definitely check that out. We want to support that, group and get them more involved in the outdoors. So that's a really great thing. All right, now let's talk striper fishing. So Henry, you being the elder statesman here, I'm going to let you get started with this. One of the things that in your list where we want to start is the patterns for the upcoming season. All right. So, we got March. This is the second day of March. And so March, April, May, I know the bass guys are all gearing up, spawn's right around the corner. I'm really not familiar with stripers. So maybe you can kind of start the conversation on that. What are we looking for, at least where you're fishing over the next month or two?
So the biggest thing you're looking for right now is basically where Terry is fishing. You want to put a GPS on Terry's boat. So no, all kidding aside, just like the bass, the bass bite, the striper bite, there's a lot of patterns, and it's all all the patterns change based on water temperature, because whatever the bait is doing is based on water temperature, and the stripers follow the bait. That's all they care about, is where they're going to get their next meal. The thing you need to know is I'm going to give you a list of different patterns, and you guys can certainly add on to what I may be missing. But keep in mind that one pattern based on water temperature sometimes overlaps with a second or a third pattern. So there can be mutual or many different patterns going on overlapping at the same time. But figuring out what the strongest pattern is at the time is what's going to get you to find the most fish. So this time of year, water temperature should be in the low 50s. Right now, it's closer to 58, 59, 60. We are just way, way ahead. Everybody is seeing blooming coming up on the trees and flowers blooming and stuff. So this is going to speed up our pattern and speed up the pre-spawn. But just to give you a quick list of what's going to go on for the next couple of months. So we're going to start seeing fish right now getting a little more, they're going to get shallow. Okay. They're in the backs of the creeks. Many of them, you'll find them in the backs of the creeks running around. You might see them on top, busting little threadfin shad. Most of the pattern you're going to find for the next 4 weeks are going to be fish eating itty bitty baits, like 1 to 2 inch long baits. And so that's one thing you're going to find. What's going to lead into that is we're going to see fish getting out into open water after that. They're going to be free swimming in the middle of the creeks. Oh,
Okay.
up high. You might not even mark big groups of fish because they may be swimming 3 to 5 feet below the surface, just out over open water. So just to give you an idea, if we were to pick one creek on Lake Lanier that nobody's ever heard of, let's say Flat Creek, okay?
Right.
What might happen?
Oh, my
That's a
secret
new
spot
one.
is out.
Yeah.
Those fish may be in the back this week, and next week they could be in the mouth of Flat Creek over open water. One of the signs that's going to help you learn where those fish are is looking for the wildlife, the birds, whether it's loons, whether it's gulls, or whether it's heron. A blue heron. If you see a blue heron on a bank and his neck's extended, stop and fish that area, especially if it's in the back of a creek. If, on the other hand, you see loons diving, you want to get on top of those loons and throw on top of those loons, because the stripers will work with the loons to ball up the bait. If you look for gulls, there are 3 kinds of gulls that we find in North Georgia, and especially on Lake Lanier. I don't know if Jeremy has them on Carter's or not, but we have the big herring gulls. Then we have the majority of our gulls are these mid-size looking, what they call ringbill gulls. And then you have the real little small ones that everybody thinks are terns, but they're not. They're actually called Bonapartes. Those are the ones you want to find, the Bonaparte little gulls that are diving on the surface. That's going to help you find fish really quick. Once all that stuff is occurring, all of a sudden the fish are going to start migrating to where there's running water. Most of it is going to be up the 2 rivers, like the Chattahoochee and the Chestatee. That's when they're going to start making their spawning run. They don't all spawn together. All right. There may be groups of fish that are in different sizes, and the big females will run up, and then the males will sit on the points and follow the females up. Okay. And by the way, it's not just stripers. I've seen Alex do that with women as well, sitting on a point waiting. Just but anyway, that's
Alex, there you go. Alex, what do you say to that comment right there, buddy?
A few left-hand turners.
There you go.
I'm not accounted for anymore, so
There
not
you go.
wrong.
Okay, I got you.
I'm just saying that because he's available, ladies. You know, and
he's a good-looking dude.
You're back swimming the river channel.
So the fish are going to run upriver and they're going to spawn. They're not going to be successful at it because our river systems, obviously, as you know, are not long enough to support a life cycle of dropping their eggs and tumbling. What's going to happen and that's all going to happen between now and, say, the middle of April, all right, 3rd week of April. When that's over with, these fish are going to come down from the river, not all at once. They're going to come down in groups over probably a 2 or 3 week period. Those fish are going to be hungry, and they are going to eat with reckless abandon after they do their spawning gig, because just like us, after we get done, we're looking for a Snickers bar, so something
Snickers
to that
bar,
effect.
okay.
I mean, that's
Henry, I just fall asleep.
I've never thought about a Snickers bar.
Well,
just fall asleep,
be
Henry.
happening too. But those
Maybe
fish
a
will come
steak.
down, and the best place to look for them are on points, long tapered points, especially near the river channel, because they're coming back down from the rivers. Once that pattern has come and gone, you're going to find fish starting to get on humps and over brush, around brush piles and stuff. And so that's going to all this stuff is going to happen between now and, say, the middle end of May. Mixed in between that, you're going to have what we call, hopefully, the redfin bite, where you can go early in the morning or late in the day and use wake baits on the surface at low light, and especially on windy days when the wake bait is masked by the wave action of a lake, and you can throw these wake baits and get some really good topwater explosions. Right. Along with that is going to be the bomber bite is going to come back in the spring when you go out at night, and that's when you really want to put a GPS on Terry's boat, because that's nighttime fishing. You're going to find those fish, on points, and especially on sandy points. And one of the reasons sandy points, especially during the bomber bite, are good is because the gizzards will be spawning on the sand or around sand in shallow water. So these are all the things that are going to occur. And then by the time May and June roll around, we're going to get the shad and the herring spawn when that water temp gets up a little higher. And then, that's when the fun begins. That's when you just get a mixture of stripers and bass and everything else fishing shallow, they on rocky points and stuff, because when the shad and the herring have to lay their eggs, they need to attach to something. So you may see herring swimming around your motor in your boat. You may see them on seawalls. You may see them on rocky points. That's basically a 4-minute overview of what's going to happen between now and, say, May.
And that's it. That's the show for tonight, guys. So that was awesome.
Nothing more to
Covered
add.
it. He covered all of it.
Let me put the old TikTok back over there. But yeah, so guys, listen. I don't know. You can all interject. I'm getting ready to just move out of the way and let you guys talk basically on what Henry just said right there, because that's a lot. So you guys have at it. Terry, go for
it. He spoke about the bomber bite, and I just wanted to throw in there, this first week in March is usually when I catch the biggest stripers I catch from Lake Lanier on a bomber at night, is March 1st through March 7th.
Okay.
If you go back, I can show you all the 30-plus pounders I've got between March 4th and March 6th.
Okay, so this is the time, though, for
right
you for
now.
that.
You're not going to get a lot of bites right now, but
so we're going, once
fish,
this is over,
we're going.
Like Henry
we're going
said,
straight to the lake,
sandy
man.
banks, chunky rock points, stuff like that.
Yeah.
At the mouths of the creek.
Okay.
I do best with those right now, but right now, throw the biggest bomber swim baits you got, throw them up on those sandy banks, and you're not going to get a ton of bites, but if you want a 30-plus pounder from Lanier at night on a lure, this is the time of year to do it.
Okay, so
right now.
Here's what's kind of interesting, too, with my guests tonight. So Henry and Terry, you're mostly Lake Lanier. You're mostly river fishing, and you're on Carter's.
Mm-hmm.
So now you both heard, we'll start with you, Alex. You heard what Henry said. Kind of, do the rivers work the same way like that? Is it similar or different?
Like Henry said, you see a lot of patterns like overlapping.
Okay.
Right. And I do not really do very well until I get like 53 north. Like, let's just say taking Lake Lanier. So what I tend to do is I will try to get on the very front end of that river pattern. And like I started fishing up there, beginning of February, because we've caught them up there in February before.
Right.
And it's interesting. Like I will try to figure out how the pulses of fish are tracking. And then I will track through different rivers and try to figure out, like, climate wise, looking at all the different temperatures, if I can find that first pulse in that first river and kind of marry up those temperatures between different watersheds, I can kind of figure out how it's peaking in different areas. And then I'll try to, start south and move north, and, different lakes have different dams that pull different water from different parts of the lakes. You have dramatically varying temperatures in all of these different locations. So it actually is something I've done with a lot of my fishing, is I've figured out one or two things to get really, really good at. And rather than trying to figure out how they turn over and transition into one another, I find other places to replicate it.
Okay.
So I'd really stick to that river pattern.
You find your strengths, and then you just go and take it from river to river to river.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Carter's Lake.
I have a question real quick for
Yeah.
Alex, when those patterns all start intertwining to one another, when do you know, how do you figure out up in the river to go to either a jerk bait versus a fluke versus a glide bait? I mean, what pattern induces which lure to be, thrown at the time?
That's actually something I really wanted to talk about tonight and get like your opinion and Jeremy's and Terry's opinion on, because I've banged my head into a wall for a number of years, like trying to force feed things. It's a bad habit of mine.
Right.
Like I will try to force feed things.
They're not going to eat what they don't want to eat.
No, they're not going to eat what they don't want to eat. Like when we were out with Paul last year in the spring, I really wanted them to catch a fish on a swim bait because, that's kind of what we had talked about.
Mm-hmm.
And that action just does not, like the glide baits just do not work in the spring. Like
Okay.
they don't work. And I'm curious what you guys' observations have been, like very similar to bass. Right now guys are like, vibration is the deal.
Yeah.
Like, you're throwing a crankbait, you're throwing a lipless, you're doing some sort of something with vibration.
Especially in the stained water.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
And for me, that the glide bait action just does not work.
Okay.
And so I default a lot more to like plastics, wake baits, multi-joint, straight line swimmers, and things that have like what I would call like a rate of stall right? Like how much action can you get out of something with essentially like zero movement?
Yeah.
Because we actually figured it out by accident. Last year, I think we were talking and he just like stopped moving the bait. And we'd had a pretty difficult like 2 hours. And he just stopped moving the bait. Mag fluke, flutter hook. Talking for like 30 seconds, about gets the rod ripped out of his hand.
So just that change in action that was accidentally.
And it was no action. It was just sitting on the bottom. And that was the only thing that was the deal. It had to sit dead on the bottom for 5, 6, 7, 8 seconds. And then
boom. We'll get to that. Let's hit Carter's real quick, and then we'll let you guys kind of answer that. So based upon what Henry says, does Carter's play like that? Very similar, or is it a little different?
Yeah, I think every lake is a little bit different in the timing of the pre-spawn, the spawn, and all that. Because we see variations in the water temperature and stuff just from Carter's to Notley or Carter's to Lanier.
Mm-hmm.
But this last warm front that we had, the water warmed up quick, and it definitely, we're seeing signs of pre-spawn now, which, as Henry said, is early. But one thing I wanted to say, somebody said something about the fish on Altoona were already in the mouth of the creeks in open water. Like I said, every lake is different, but we see some pretty crazy stuff like that. But everybody thinks, and I want to get y'all's guys' input on this, but I have customers, clients call and ask all the time, when's the stripers running up the river? And I feel like personally, most of these lakes here,
open answer.
Yeah, I think most of these lakes around here, I don't know, besides Lanier, but Carter's, Notley, the small lake, I don't know if it's. There is fish going to go up in the rivers and run in the springtime, but we've learned for years that they don't all go up in the river.
No.
There's a lot of fish that go up in these creek arms and spawn, and there can be some really good bites, in there, as you guys know. But it's amazing to me how many people think, and I guess it may be from the saltwater stuff, people think that in the springtime you got to be in the river, which is not the case. But we're seeing everything that Henry talked about, we're already seeing, and we see the same thing where, like pre-spawn, the fish will be in the back of the creeks, probably up closer to the bank. But as the spring goes, and as we get further into the spawn, we'll see a lot of fish in open water. You'll catch fish out in the middle of nowhere, just pulling a spread. We see that a lot. So a lot of the same thing. I know Lanier and Carter's is totally different, but a lot of the same patterns that Henry said is just, to me, it's just basic striper fishing stuff that, every lake's going to be a little different.
Right. Well, you guys, I'm getting out of the way of this conversation, so y'all can just start going up with anybody.
One thing I'd imagine though with Carter's, tell me if I'm picking your brain as usual about Carter's because it's the untapped resource for me. But would you say that a lot of fish come and go out of the river? Like, one day the fish will be up in the river and then another day they won't. Because like Carter's, it's a very short run from the lake to the riverine environment, whereas Lanier, it's it's miles till they get up to the river.
Yeah. I feel like there is a couple groups of fish that move in and out.
Yeah.
And then I also feel like that there's fish that just stay up there all the time. Yeah. You got those fish that are hanging around those blowdowns that are just there. Seem like all the time. They're not always going to bite or show themselves, but I feel like they just don't move. But there is a couple groups of fish. I feel like, when I say groups, I'm talking 20, 30 fish in a school. I feel like they, one, like you say, one day they'll be there, the next day they won't. And that's everywhere, even in the creeks.
Yeah.
You might be on them one day in a creek, and then you show up there the next day expecting that you're going to do the same thing, and they'll be gone.
That's what I noticed when I was there. It's a very short run from like Doll Mountain Boat Ramp. I could be way up the river in just a couple minutes.
Yeah.
Like, wow. This
and
is
I think I mentioned this on the last show, but when I first started fishing Carter's Lake, the fish didn't seem to move as much as they do now.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's another thing within itself. But
it kind of seems like Lanier's the same way. The fish used to be. I always noticed one thing on Lanier that I noticed for many years is like the stripers would almost pick one creek arm or one area of the lake, and that would be the hotbed of striped bass for most of the
once
winter.
you found it, you could stay on it for a long time.
But
now we there's a lot of times where we don't know from one day to the next. Everybody thinks, man, that we've got a special spot that we can go out there and just do, but it's not that way. We from one day to the next.
Well, it's funny. I have a special spot when I fish Altoona. I have a special spot that I go to all the time. It's called Follow First Bite Guide Service, Robert Edson.
There you go.
That's what everybody else does. So.
When I follow that boat, I just seem to luck out and get in the right place every time.
Yeah, let me all you guys in the comment sections too. Definitely not ignoring you guys tonight. There's just so much to be said, but let's pull up one right there. So, not on duty adventures. That striper moves so much. Find them one day, and the next day you'll spend 24 hours trying to find them again. So basically, what you're saying, can't stay on them. They're moving so much. I guess following the bluebacks. Does that sound right, Henry? Or just following the bait? Kind of like what you said.
They can move 40, 50 miles a day. I mean, they can move that much.
Well, and
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, for a long time, I thought that, it was the herring that was causing it because we used to not have herring. So that only made sense. But, I know some guys that catch, shad, and they say that they're experiencing things with that now that they've never experienced before, with shad moving around a lot. And, he told me that, you throw the net a few times and they're gone kind of thing, where we used to, it wasn't like that. You could pull up and just catch hundreds of shad. So there's something going on, I feel like that it's changing the lake and all the bait, not just blueback herring.
I'm going to bring something up that's very controversial. And I know Alex is going to agree with me on this because I just think he will. And I think he's one of the smarter guys in the room.
Definitely over me. There you go.
But here's what I
think. He don't have a lot of competition tonight, Henry, with me. So go ahead.
Here's what I think is happening on a lot of lakes in and around not just in Georgia, but the whole country. I believe that our electronics has changed the game, and I don't know how you do this. I'm not up enough ready to do this yet, but I almost feel like if I go in a creek and I see their stripers, I can't get them to stay under my boat, just like you can't get the bait to, you find them here and why they're gone. I think you need to shut your electronics off. I think the sonar, the pinging on these machines, when we started fishing 25 years ago, 30 years ago, those machines, could get you to 600 feet. Now they get you to 6,000 feet. Which means that the ping to me that's going down on the sonar, I think can affect the fish, along with side imaging, along with live scan, and all this new technology that's coming out. I think these fish feel that stuff, and I think they are less likely to stay put. And I have spoke to people at Lawrence and at Humminbird, and while everybody tends to think from there that that's not the reason, all I could tell you is, Terry, do you remember a guide on Lanier named Stephen Knight?
Yeah.
Stephen Knight had, when all of us changed over to the latest and greatest Humminbird equipment that is just absolutely killer. And I don't care what electronics you use, as long as it's Humminbird. Otherwise, I don't care. They're all good. Right? They're not as good as Humminbird. But anyway, in truth be known, he stayed with an old Lawrence unit that was just not the latest and greatest, not as strong a signal. He was the only guide for a couple of years that could keep fish under his boat, and the rest of us couldn't. And I don't know why that is, but it leads me to believe that it has something to do with that ping coming down from the sonar and bouncing off the bottom. And I just
100%.
suspect it moves fish.
100%.
And I can tell you one thing. If you're up in Tennessee and you're below a dam where guides are trying to catch skipjack and you have your sonar on, you're going to get punched in the face.
Yeah.
Those guys will put a hole in your boat for leaving your sonar on.
There we go.
To catch skipjack.
Got a TikTok comment. I agree on first bite. So there you go. So
skipjack are highly sensitive to sonar pings.
It's 100% a thing. And I have 2 points to my response to that. One, I don't run electronics. I don't.
Not as necessary in a river.
No, it's just not. It's just not necessary. Like I have a graph that I will throw on my boat if I go to the lake, if I remember to grab it, which is like 1 time out of 5. So, I've seen like different behaviors in the river where I'll see guys coming down live skipping a bank, right, and nothing, and they're dragging bait on planer boards down there. And these fish can hear it because, like, I should not be able to come right behind a boat with live bait that is running electronics, pointing it at these fish and catch them on a glide bait right behind.
Okay, so
Like,
you
you
say
shouldn't be
it
able to
has
do
some
that.
merit to it.
I think so.
I think it does.
And
I'll tell
here
you
it's like,
this, Terry, here's a perfect example. And Terry, I'm going to be honest. I haven't tried this yet, but I've been thinking about it starting, like I thought about it a couple of weeks ago. When you used to fish, let's just use Flat Creek, and you would go around the bank and throw your bomber at night. Why do you're throwing your bomber on the bank and reeling it in? Why do you need your electronic on if it could possibly move fish that are up shallow? Why do you need it?
The only thing I would do on nights like that, I would leave my lake map up to make sure I stay up on the flat, but I wouldn't have the sonar on.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
So
Well,
I
tell
think,
me what you think about-
there's something to it.
tell me what you think about this, Henry, because I've heard this not just from striper guys. I've heard it from bass guys, crappie guys, striper, but I've heard it only from the lake guys that all of their lakes are fishing dramatically differently since Panoptics has come into the fold. And I have not heard that from the river guys at all. Like, not anything has changed. And we don't use electronics like that.
Mm-hmm.
I personally think the sonar has something to do with it, but that's been around for so long, like, they have to be kind of habituated to it. I think that, they react to human behavior in so many other ways. All of a sudden, people can see them and chase them, and they have no quarter. Like, all of a
So
sudden,
you're saying fishing pressure?
yeah.
Okay.
I mean, people are just chasing them around the lake because they have a live image that now they can shoot, 200 feet around the boat, find them over there. It cuts down the time to find them into like 5% of what it was, and you can just stay on top of them and chase them around and harass them to the ends of the earth.
Okay, no,
Like,
that makes sense.
Why
you can
why
see how
would
they
they stay
react
in
to
the
your
same
bait now.
location?
Well,
everything.
what about you, Jeremy? Because you're a guide, and I know
Yeah.
you use electronics. So
Man, I definitely agree with Henry because I mean, especially if you get a bunch of boats around, I mean, you can see the interference pinging. You're pinging off another. I mean, you can be across the creek from another boat and pick up interference from their graph. So if we're seeing that, the effects of that on there, it's got to be affecting the fish in some
Look
way.
at the megahertz that some of the new chirp transducers.
Well,
are
that was going to be my question to Henry, or I don't know. It might be a good question for Mac too. Is there a different setting on there that we can use that will help what you're talking about?
all right, Henry, did you get that question? Did you hear that?
I'm not sure. I don't know if changing the transducer would do that to go from one, because you have other settings. I don't know.
Yeah, I know there's a couple different frequencies, and I know which ones I like as far as the ones I like the way they look. But I was wondering if there's a certain frequency that would be better about what you're talking about.
Not affecting the fish as much.
Yeah.
Just something enough to find it.
Yeah, because I mean, honestly, I feel like there's times where I could probably cut my graph off and be fine, but as soon as they quit biting, I'm gonna turn it right back on, just because it's nature. I want to know if there's something around.
And you're also in a business. You're putting your clients on.
Yeah, if I can't catch them, I at least want to be able to say, "Hey, here they are."
We're getting smarter using our electronics, and the fish are getting smarter too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Before we get going, I want to.
Danny, let me just say one thing, because I was having this conversation with Mac maybe 2 hours ago. We were talking. Certain lakes don't seem to be affected by a lot of this. Like he was telling me, Lake Murray is fishing and continues to fish off the charts, and even like Sinclair, another lake that just fishes off the charts. And the discussion we were having is, well, do you think it's because they get less pressure, or do you think it's just because, quite frankly, they have so many more fish?
It's a good question. That's a good question. I wish I had the answer.
I think the same thing kind of at Altoona. They say there's great numbers and there's huge schools of fish. They can be 10, 15 boats in one area and everybody's catching fish. It's not that way at Carter's. I mean, I can promise you can be catching fish and you have a couple boats come in on you and it'll screw everybody up. Nobody will catch any fish.
Jeremy, one of the things somebody was asking before about how do you know when to start going up the river? I can tell you it won't help you on Lanier, but it will positively help you if you're going up the Etowah or any of these other rivers. When the white bass go first. So if you can find out from your tackle shops when the white bass are making their spawning run upriver, the stripers are going to be right behind them within a couple weeks.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I got a comment on TikTok I want to get to real quick, but I want to shout out one of our fine sponsors, Buford Dam Bait and Tackle, right there. So, guys, listen, Buford Dam Bait and Tackle, they're a local shop just like we are, located at 2595 Buford Dam Road, Cumming, Georgia. Dave and the guys will set you up. I know we're talking about stripers tonight. They got a lot of striper gear there. They will set you up. But if you're also into bass and into fishing for trout down below Buford Dam, Dave and the guys at Buford Dam Bait and Tackle are the ones for you. Give them a call, 706-429-7211. They'll tell you what you need to be successful, not what they want to get rid of. They're going to set you up just right. So give them guys a call. Had a comment, seen the hybrid bite go dead after a bunch of boats get in an area on Allatoona.
Yeah.
So that leads me to kind of think that might be something, kind of along the lines of what you guys are talking about. But
it's pressure.
Yeah, pressure. But let's be honest, those electronics are not going anywhere. There's
No.
too much money in it right now. So there's something. Do you think the fish will ever get conditioned to it?
I think it's happening now to where they're conditioned to avoid it.
To avoid it.
Yeah.
Okay. But will it ever just be a commonplace? Also, too, there was a comment by Philip Hutchinson for you, Terry, earlier. What makes you think, what is it about March 1st through the 7th that make those stripers come up? That was earlier in the thing. I'm sorry, Philip. I didn't get to
that
it.
new moon in March, for whatever reason, brings a lot of herring shallow at night for those couple. They're not spawning yet. I know some people, they're spawning. I know the spawn happens later, but for whatever reason, that first new moon in March, that first week, the herring come up shallow at night, and so do the gizzard shad on the the shallow sandy flats and rocks. And I think that's what the big female stripers are up there looking for, is the big herring, the big shad, stuff like that. But it's like a really minute window that first week. Like I said, we can go over and I can just show you, 30 plus pounder and all the what do they call the dates at the bottom of your photo?
Oh yeah.
The time and dates on my
Timestamp
and stuff, the
tag.
My
Okay, all right,
photos
yeah.
are all March 3rd, March 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and like that first week of March, I used to take off from work and just go ham nasty on Lake Lanier looking for that 30 because I knew I was going to get it.
Got another great comment here on TikTok, too. Motor hum is normal to them, and electronics will eventually do the same.
Yeah.
So you think eventually they'll get conditioned to
I
it?
have crunked the motor up before, and I feel like it would help keep fish under the boat.
Yes.
Yeah, no,
Just like the thumping.
that's
that
what I
a lot
was
of
getting
people are
ready to
doing.
say. You several
They
times
think
you've been
you're
on-
leaving.
You talk about the thumping.
Oh yeah, if you leave, man, you go to leave, they'll show up every time.
Every time. Got a question from Clinton, Maine. I appreciate you joining us tonight. Is cut bait allowed below Morgan Falls, Alex?
It is.
It is.
It is.
It is. Is that something you use often? But you're more into the baits and stuff.
I'll use baits in some of the northern fisheries that I go to, when I'm traveling, and I really got back into that a little bit last year. But, we've got a really good defined artificial bite, first 2-3 hours of the day, last 2-3 hours of the day. And if I'm traveling somewhere and I want to make good use of my time, I have no problem cast netting some shad and flipping one in there. But at home here, no, I don't. That fishery takes so much abuse and so many people take so many fish out of there. I couldn't do it. There's so many people that just whack fish down there with live bait.
Okay.
You got,
That's interesting because Paul told me when he went with you last year, he found 2 cans of corn in your boat.
Paul, you weren't supposed to say anything, man.
Hey, it is what it is.
I didn't tell him what brand.
Good. The sauce is safe.
What's interesting about all you guys is all you guys fish a little bit different. Henry is fly rod. He's the fly rod. You're fishing big artificials in the river. You probably, for your clients, are using mostly live bait. Mostly live bait, and then you like to throw artificials as well. You do a little bit of everything. So, Henry, I put out a TikTok the other day of you from one of our podcasts, and I want to go ahead because I don't want to forget about this. I want to get this on. I want to get this on camera where you were talking about how stripers specifically feed on the surface, but technically they're little subsurface. And now, when does that come into play? And I know this wasn't on our list, but it's been on my mind because I had a lot of comments on TikTok about that. A lot of guys were like, "No, that's wrong." But this is your experience with it.
Listen, I can't tell you how many times I've been in a creek, especially in the winter, December, January, maybe even as late if we have a cold November, but certainly December, January, and into February, when those fish are feeding on young of the year threadfin shad and they get on the surface, you'll see big old explosions or just toilet bowl flushes mostly. And what
Right.
you're seeing is you're not seeing the striper's mouth. You're seeing the tail kick of the fish coming back down. They are actually coming up, rolling on their sides, a foot under the surface, opening their mouth, taking in a gob of threadfin, giving a tail kick to go back down. And people see that swirl or that tail kick, and they start throwing poppers in there, and they can't hook a fish. They just can't do it. Those fish are not eating on top. Those fish are eating just below the surface.
It was amazing the amount of comments that I got from that post, and Henry is I consider him an expert in the field, and you wouldn't believe the people like, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about and stuff like that. And somebody would pop up, do you know who Henry Cowan is and all that? So, but that is interesting. Now, is that something that is just striper, or do you think spots and stuff for us bass guys similar? Are we missing a lot of fish because we're throwing that popper in?
No, I see spot, more. I see spots. What I think the big difference, at least from my experience, and I'm not saying I know for sure. I can only tell you what I've witnessed over 25 years fishing these fish down here. I find spots generally zero into a bait and will chase that bait as it's skipping all over the surface, and they just get like tunnel vision to go after that one specific bait, where stripers are taking that shad and just balling them up and just moving through them almost like you're plowing dirt. You know what I mean?
Okay.
That's what it seems like to me.
I just thought the amount of comments that we received on that was just absolutely amazing. But now,
it's funny is I've observed the exact inverse in the river.
Okay, let's talk about it.
The exact reverse. Like, I can get spots to break off of the bait, and I think it has to do with like the bait size, because we don't really have to deal with the variance in like size of bait like you guys do in the lake, where it's like, okay, they're on 2-inch threadfin over open water. Like, they're far more opportunistic in that environment. And I'm thinking back to one on a river last year where we had this like big mid-river rock. It was like relatively clear, low water, and I'd actually swung this bait over the rock and caught a 28-pounder, and the fish that was with it came up and started chasing a shad right next to the boat, and it was just following it, figure eight. And my buddy that was with me, we had caught a couple of shad earlier, and he flipped that shad, and he totally terrible cast, right, and flipped it like 7 feet past the thing, and it just went dink, beeline right to it, broke off that bait and inhaled it.
Okay.
But that's like the variance in, I think, how they have to operate in these different environments. Like in the lake, they can pick and choose. In the river, they're there to do something to either spawn or survive. And they're just trying to take advantage of like opportunistic windows.
Okay.
So,
and Danny, I'll tell you this. I think how they feed on herring is very different than how they feed on juvenile threads. When I had, we had the fly fishing show here about 3 weeks ago that came into town, and we had, all the everybody and anybody in the fly fishing world in the United States came to Atlanta for 3 days. And I had the pleasure to take out the guys from Scientific Angler and Orvis on a morning trip. And we got into these fish doing exactly what we're talking about. And I said, guys, tell me if you see the top of the striper, the dark green on its back when we pull up to these things, or tell me if you're seeing only their stripes. Now, keep in mind, we're looking down in the water at a little bit of an angle. And they pulled up and they just kept telling me, man, I could see these have beautiful stripes. We're seeing the side of the fish. Well, how in the world are you seeing the side of the fish looking almost straight down, vertically down at the fish next to the boat? Those fish were rolling on their sides, just taking in gobfuls of little bait. I don't know that they do that with herring. I don't think they do, quite frankly. The biggest difference I notice is that when stripers are feeding near the surface on herring, they're making big white splashes that you could see from a quarter of a mile away. But when they're on itty bitty threadfin, usually you're just seeing subtle toilet bowl flush boils. It's a much different look to the top water bite, what we would call a top water bite, even though technically it's not on top.
Okay. Jeremy, what do you see on Carter's when we, something like that, when you see the stripers that are up on the surface?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, we don't see, like we've talked about on there before, we don't see the top water activity like everybody does at Lanier. We just don't. The top water activity we'll see will be fish coming up and hitting our baits that we're using.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen them both ways, like Henry's talking about, with coming up with shad, rolling up on their side, and sometimes I feel like they're trying to kill them and then eat them or something just by the way they're doing it. But as far as seeing different top water things, we don't see a lot of top water. I think it's because our bait stays so deep most of the time.
Okay. Henry, I just threw that in there again. Like I said, I put that TikTok out from our podcast, and it was one of the better ones as far as comments and stuff like that. Everybody's opinionated on that.
I think the stuff like Terry does at nighttime is going to be the best, but you're not going to see it. You're going to hear it and feel it.
The best night bite
you guys, I'm sorry about
for
moving this
top
camera
water in years was actually at Carter's last year.
Yeah.
That night that I was up there, it was if I closed my eyes and took myself back, it was like going back into the mid-2000s on Lake Lanier at night in the springtime. Yeah. I mean, the stripers were just unloading on those herring up shallow by those flats to come out of Doll Mountain to the right. There's that series of flats and points there to the right.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I just sat in one spot. They were crashing on bait. Like I could hear stripers crashing on the other side of the lake on bait. And I'm like, I'm in heaven. This is my new favorite lake.
Well, I've been out there in the mornings early,
hours later,
trying to catch bait, and I can hear it sounds like somebody's dropping bowling balls in the water everywhere.
Yep.
And I'm throwing the net trying to get my bait for my trip, and it's eating me up because I want to go fishing.
I
want to go fishing.
I bet.
But go ahead.
No, Henry, you now fly fishing though, you have to use the visuals sometimes, and you, like you said, you're looking at the birds, you're looking at stuff like that, and you kind of know the areas where it's happening, but you're actually looking for signs like that to target with your fly rod, correct?
Many times I am. I'm looking for the wildlife. The wildlife helps me an incredible amount, whether it's loons, whether it's gulls, or whether it's greater blue herons. And quite frankly, it's the posture of those birds that tell me whether it's really happening there or it's going to happen there, or they're just looking for bait. Danny, you could talk to anybody who's worth his salt tarpon fishing. And when you hear about people fishing for laid up tarpon, down in Florida, the guides that know their stuff can pull up to a fish, see them and say, let's keep moving. That fish isn't going to eat, just from the posture of the way that tarpon is laid up and sitting. And the wildlife that we have on, at least that I see on Lanier, because we have all the different species of, birds that will eat threadfin shad and whatnot, they are an enormous help, whether they're feeding on top or whether they're going to tell me that, there's fish 15 to 25 feet down. And, it's just learning, having the experience of what you saw, and then being able to go in and see what that showed you. In other words, when I see birds circling, when I see gulls circling around the top 50, 60, 80 feet above the lake water, above the top water of the lake, the surface, when I see that and they're going round and round in circles, I already know that they see either a big pot of bait or they see a school of stripers underneath that are deep. But when I see them flying low to the surface, maybe not diving, but low to the surface and flying around in circles, I know for a fact that bait is up high on the water column. So just learning what that is. Just like we talked earlier, you're driving on the lake and you see a heron sitting on a point, and if his neck is extended, he's hunting and he likely sees bait off that point. If his neck is tucked into his body like this, he's just resting. I don't even bother with that heron. So I let same thing with loons. We have loons. Jeremy, do you have loons on Carters?
We do have some loons, but not a lot. And that's what I was going to say.
We have a lot of loons.
A lot of loons, yeah. And we don't have many seagulls. I mean, very few gulls do we see.
Yeah.
So the loons have helped me find fish before on Carters, but it's so sporadic that it's not something that we can count on from day to day.
So I mean, you know what? So for the listening audience out there, the way loons can help you find the fish in the spring, very simply is if you see one loon or you see 6 or 8 loons going underwater, and then all of a sudden they pop up 100 feet away. And then as you slow down, you don't go on top of them. You give them space. You give them a little space. You don't rush on top of them. If they go underwater again, come up 100 or 150 feet away, those loons are looking for bait. They're looking for their next meal. But when a loon goes down and pops up and goes down and pops up in a very defined area, I will go with a sinking line and throw right on top of that loon. And more often than not, I will be able to hook a striper that's working with the loons, balling up the bait. And the only bad experience I ever had with that was when I took Terry out with me and he hooked a loon and he wanted to keep it because he said that was going to be Thanksgiving.
you hooked the loon, huh? Little bony like that.
I feel like they'd be greasy.
It's
greasy.
Bass guys do that. I know Ryan. He calls not the loons, but they're starting to look. If they're in the back of a pocket or something like that, and if they see what we call them Fred, that's that heron that's sitting there with the long neck looking in that, and it's something I've noticed these guys use over the last couple of years. And I find it interesting. But most of the times, I went out with Kevin Underwood a couple of weeks ago, and he saw loons diving. And coming up, he goes, "We're fishing right here." And we caught a couple fish there. We were going for spotted bass at the time, but still, it's very interesting. Use Mother Nature to your advantage.
100%.
Yeah.
He's probably
and the fish don't get nervous. The fish are not affected by Mother Nature like they are with an electronics.
Okay, yeah, makes perfect sense.
Doesn't bother them.
Makes perfect sense. So, what do you use nature-wise? I'm curious of this, and I'm going to ask Alex the same question. He's talking about on Lanier. We got all these. You said you don't have them as much, or the birds as much. Is there something else that Mother Nature has put out there that just triggers the light bulb for you up on Carters? And then that same question to you on the river when he gets done.
Most of the time, no. There is not a lot of things Mother Nature-wise that we can look to on Carters. And I think it's because the bait stays so deep most of the time, like we've already talked about.
Right.
That's why I feel like I'm so dependent on my electronics at Carters.
Different game.
But I'm going to tell this story because I think it might be a help to somebody, because I'm fishing, I'm fishing up there at Carters one spring, and that bite had been kind of slow. I'm not marking any fish anywhere. Nowhere I go, I can't mark fish. And I called Robert Edison. I said, man, something's wrong with my sonar. I'm not marking any fish. And he said, the time of year it is, he said, they're probably so shallow you're not going to see them. He said, you just got to fish. You just got to pull for them. And so if anything, when it's like that, I feel like my baits are my best tool to find the fish. The big shad will let you know where the fish are.
Pull it and let them
Even if you don't catch them, you're going to get the action. You're going to see the fish. They're going to show themselves, where in some cases you might not see them on all this technology that they have now, which is great. Don't get me wrong, but I still feel like there's times where it doesn't help us. As dependent on it as I am, there's times where you might as well cut it off.
Got to have some guts.
You got something, Paul?
Yeah, Jeremy, I wanted to ask you, how do you find Nautilus to be? Does it set up more similar to Lanier, just kind of as a traditional Highland reservoir, or is it kind of in the same vein as Carter's?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot smaller than Lanier, obviously, but I feel like the way it fishes, the way the fish are, you can fish, you can find those flats and stuff this time of year, a 5-6 foot flat up there this time of year off the main river channel or in the back of a creek is hard to beat. Where Carter's, there's not really many flats. It's
No.
you know,
yours
it's
is
points
just a
and
bowl.
rock ledges and stuff like that. So,
And
so
Notley
yeah,
gets
it's definitely
gulls.
different.
And Notley what?
Notley gets some gulls too.
They do
Yeah.
get some goals. and all
Notley
that.
gets not
Notley-
now Notley, Henry is somewhere that I have seen a lot of topwater action like what you guys experience at Lanier.
it's
With
just-
the thread fins and the herring and all
I'll
that.
tell you, the guys that I took out from Orvis and Cy Angler in the beginning of the month, the day before I took them out, they fished Notley and they had fish on top as well. They had
Yeah.
fish blowing up and rolling around and whatnot. They didn't have any gulls that day. What actually tipped them off to the fish was they had 3 or 4 blue heron on in an area, just all sitting on the points, different points in a cove, and just all feeding and eating happily. And then all of a sudden, it just opened up. That they found, the herons is what turned them on to the striper.
Yeah.
Okay. Alex, what about you on the river?
Herons, number one, we don't get gulls or loons
Right.
or anything like that. Like the posture of the herons, first and foremost. If they're up in the trees, you might as well just take a nap
Yeah.
or wander around try to figure out where the fish are. So when they fire, you're around them. And it's a little bit different in the river because it's not like as active. You're not getting that feedback from, gulls. It's not as visual. It's more like historical data.
Right.
Right. So for me, otters are a big one. And people
That's interesting.
People hate otters.
Yeah.
They absolutely hate them. And I don't think they should. They're just living their little otter lives. Just don't shoot them in the head. But in a river system, the otters are only going to occupy like the 1 or 2 primary, deepest, best holding areas. And they're not always like obvious in a river because you're not running electronics. Like you get into some areas where you really just don't know how deep it is. And one of the best places we found on a certain river, our mutual friend knows it. We found out that was 28 feet deep in the middle of a trout river. And we're like, oh, cool. There's all of our friend group caught 40 pounders out of that hole over the course of the summer. And it's the only hole in the whole river with otters.
Okay. So you just used a little bit different Mother Nature to kind of key you in on that. Terry, you fish a lot at night. What about you?
I got a quick question.
Yeah, ask it. Yeah.
Do you think when the otters are really active, did they shut down the bite?
I've never really picked up on that because I never see them all that active, like actively hunting. I would suspect for like the class of fish that we're chasing, I would think they're fired up when the otters are hunting because they're making it's just an additional hunter. Like Henry said, they're working with the loons to move bait around.
Yeah.
Especially if you have like trout or suckers or something that's more of a river forage that is laid up in a much different way than a shad or an open water bait fish, right? Like these fish are hiding in crevices and timber, tucked up under little grass edges and stuff. So personally, I would think when the otters go ballistic and start pushing everything out of all their holes and it's just mass mayhem, that's when your big boys would probably be active. Personally, I think your 5-10 pounders be running for the hills.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I'd seen there was a 1 year, 2015-ish, where a couple otters made camp back in Flat Creek for about 2 months, and when they were really active, the bite was dead. Like literally, it was a ghost town as far as striped bass went. Like the striped bass did not want to be near those guys.
Now, do you think that's because in a lake they got so much, they can escape it, but in a river they're kind of hemmed up in that one area?
And I think it has to do with size, like he said. That's why I was curious. Do the otters harass a 40-pound class fish? Because I know they'll chase. I've seen the one with like a 7-pounder. With like he had, it was an otter this big with a striper that big, and he drug him up onto the island in Flat Creek, and he was just gnawing on his head. I'm like,
that's amazing. What about
he's instead of eating 20 herring, I'm going to eat a 7-pound striper.
It's crazy that we're talking about this kind of stuff because there's times where it seems like nothing phases them at all.
Mm-hmm.
There's birds diving, there's loons going, and fish are being caught.
Right on top.
And it don't matter. But there is times where it seems like, or maybe it's coincidence, but there's a lot of things you experience that you start putting things together and you feel like there's something to it, whether it is or not. It's in our head.
It's in your head. It's interesting just listening to you guys talk about how you using this and using that. Henry, I want to get on something with you that you had brought up in my notes about how we're going to chase stripers in different water columns. So I assume, you can separate it as you want, but let's talk about, if they're up, if they're down, stuff like that.
Yeah. So
let you join in on that conversation.
Well, for an artificial guy, fly rodder, which is different than, let's say, an artificial guy throwing a jig, a spoon fishing. A guy who's spooning can go down 60 feet, at the bottom of the water column if you're on a 60-foot bottom and catch stripers. But for me, I can't target fish really much below 30 feet. I mean, I can, but the problem is the fastest sinking lines that they make for deep fishing sink about 6 to 7 inches per second. So let's just use the number 6 for argument's sake, because it's easily divisible. If a fly line can sink 6 inches per second, that means it takes 2 seconds to get down a foot. So if I see fish at 25 feet, I got to count to 50 to get my fly down to that level. So that's why anything below 30 feet makes it next to impossible, because these fish are not just, staying put, they're moving. So for me, there's the top of the water column, which I call, right on the surface, the first from the surface down to say 5 feet. Then anything from 5 to 10 is that, or 3 to 10 even, is that middle of the water column. And then anything below 10 to me is the bottom of the water column for a fly rod. Now, for someone who's fishing artificial like Terry or Alex, I would say that, you have the top of the water column when you're thinking poppers, wake baits, and then you go down to the mid-level, which could be 3 to 10 feet down, where you're throwing jerk baits and, crank baits. And then you've got anything below that, below 10 or even 15. And then it's just a matter of what you're going to do to, obviously you could throw a jig or you could throw a spoon and jig them. But the key for me in the water column fishing on the fly is that if the school is moving through, if you guys ever look at, here's somebody, most of us know Jeff Blair, okay? Really good striper guide on Lanier. Him and Clay Cunningham, but especially Jeff, posts a lot of pictures of screenshots on his Facebook page. And when you see those fish are usually not from 5 feet down to 30 feet. They're usually within Jeremy, I'm assuming you probably see the same thing. Your school of fish is usually within a 10 or 15 foot window, whether it's 15 to 30 or whether it's 30 to 45. They're in that window of where they're swimming. So I need my bait as a fly fisherman to stay in that window. And so, in other words, what I'm saying is if I was finding fish 10 to 20 feet down, a spoon is going to drop through them fairly quickly, okay, where I can get a fly to stay in that column. So knowing which part of the water column I'm going to fish, the key is for me to get that fly to suspend in that part of the water, or what you and I would call the strike zone. And that just becomes a little more difficult with an artificial. Not as difficult when you're trolling bait or you're trolling umbrella rigs, because you can set it up you can speed up or slow down to get that umbrella rig to troll through that water column where the fish should be. Very hard to do that with an artificial on like a lure and get it to stay, and in a certain water column. You probably can with a crankbait, but there's not many baits that you can get to do that with.
What do you think about that, Jeremy?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely times when, at Carter's where the fish, are hanging in that tight window, like what he's talking about. And, I feel like that's what, to kind of getting back to what I was talking about when the fish were up so shallow, I wasn't marking them. All I had to do, it was so simple. All I had to do was shorten my baits up behind my punter boards, get them up higher, speed up a little bit, get them moving a little faster. We started catching fish. I just wasn't at that right at that
You
right
weren't,
depth
in,
call.
you weren't in the strike zone.
I wasn't in the strike zone, man. And I mean, sometimes 5 foot can make all the difference in the world.
That's what I was getting ready to ask you guys. Are stripers as picky as far as
They
we
can
can
be.
call spots up off a hump, 30 foot of water. You can throw top water over them on
They
Lanier
can
and call
be.
them up. Can
I
you
mean-
do the same thing with a striper in the river, in the lake? I mean, is it something similar?
I mean, like I
Sometimes
said, there's
they want to be hit in the face. Sometimes they'll go 80 feet to grab a bait. It
yeah,
depends on their activity
it's
levels.
different. It's different from day to day. Like I said, there's times where I feel like you can't do any wrong. They're hitting everything you got out there, and then there's times where I feel like I have to get real precise on how things are.
Right.
I've had times where I feel like the further away I had my boards out beside the boat, getting them out away from the boat, that was the ticket that day. But then, in the same sense, the biggest striper I ever caught on Lake Lanier come up 15 foot behind my motor and hit a shad. Transom bait. So, I mean, I've seen that work. Yeah, I've seen that work both ways.
You put right in your prop wash of your motor from your trolling. That little swirl
Yes,
you get in the
sir.
back of the boat when your trolling motor's going. Put a big shad right in there and just let them glide back and forth behind the boat.
And they come up and attack it like
Some
that.
of the biggest stripers you'll ever hook.
And if
will
you
be
don't hook
on
one,
that
you'll
bait.
get attention with it.
Okay.
I hooked my biggest one with 6 feet of line out.
Yeah.
That's crazy. I can imagine it. I got a question right here from Not On Duty Adventures. Do you guys pay attention to fish activity moon phases?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Especially at night.
Yes.
For me, the moon
Yeah.
phases are my biggest advantage and disadvantage are during moon phases.
Okay, well, let's explain it. Let's go.
Well, you mind if I'm not
Go
this
for
one?
it. Go for
The other night, case in point, I was at Notley a weekend before last, and the moon. I was fishing dock lights this night, and dock lights when the moon is bright, the dock light doesn't have a big effective range because it's bright outside. So the dock light's only illuminating a smaller area.
Mm-hmm.
So on that particular night, those stripers were really tight to that light, and like we said, I had to literally get my lure within a foot or two of their face for them to hit it. If it was 5 feet outside the their little circular range that they were going around the light, they wouldn't touch it. But the moon phase in March and April, those are the two best times. The new moon phase in March is my best for my big fish, and I've had some of the most phenomenal nights fishing in April, topwater at night during the brightest full moons, to where it's just nonstop from the minute the sun went down till the sun came up. Those fish were just going nuts all night long.
Okay, Alex.
And I'll speak to the other part of the question because you're talking, about your full and new moon phases. Yeah. And I think he had a second part to it that was talking about majors and minors. And I really want Henry's input on this with his saltwater background. But I think we always forget in large part that these are not natural freshwater fish. And they are attuned to the tides. They're a saltwater fish that operates on tides. And we see it in terms of like how we dictate what we fish in the river in terms of flow. So they're obviously still geared to tides. Yeah. And those majors and minors are associated with the high and low tides. Moon directly overhead, directly underfoot. So I've found it personally to hold very true, especially if there are not like overarching weather conditions, like a big frontal system, like a big drop in barometric pressure. If there's not a whole lot going on condition-wise, those major and minors really do seem to hold for me. And I would like to have Henry's input on that and what he thinks about it in terms of both tidal effects and what other aspects of striper you see translate from saltwater.
All right, Mr. Professor.
I have found over the years that following the major is spot on when they eat on the major. And when they don't eat on the major, I find it fully what. So I have not been able to equate the minor and the major on these lakes. I have had some incredible days listening to, whatever the guy's name is on Channel 2 who does who's the guy who gives you the fishing times?
Glenn Burns. It used to be Glenn Burns. Yeah.
I have gone with Glenn Burns and saw what his major and minor fish time. And there are days I go out and whack them, and I come back and I toast Glenn Burns. And then there are days where I'm actually
right.
Didn't mean a thing. So I don't go by the major and the minor, but I do go by the moons. As Terry talked about his, like we are today is March 2nd. And we're coming up to a full moon on March 7th. And I can just tell you that the likelihood is, if you don't want to be a night owl like Terry, you need to fish as we get onto that full moon. You need to fish closer to the middle of the day, because it's more likely that those fish are going to eat sometime between 10:30 and 2 p.m. than they will normally early and late, which tends to be, when most fish seem to be quote unquote active. So that's, and I find the new moon, they could feed during the day or midday too, but the full moon especially, I find the midday bite is really, really strong.
Okay, what do you think about that, Jeremy?
I mean, it sounds like Henry's talking about Carter's, because it's the same way for me.
Well, you practically have a tide.
yeah, pretty much. But I was going to say the same thing about the moon. It's either, if you don't want to go in the middle of the night, sometimes I'll get there early to catch bait. I'll catch the tail end of that bite during the middle of the night. But if you don't hit that, a lot of times on a full moon, it will be 12, 1, 2 o'clock in the middle of the day at a time that you wouldn't normally be on a good bite.
Yep.
It's when it'll be good on a full moon. So the moon definitely affects the feeding times. But I'm
Jeremy,
like Henry.
This is why I insisted they bring you back tonight. So you can agree with me on this.
Do you agree with him on that?
Which part?
All of it was a lot right there.
Well,
I was listening to him, and then I heard.
I know. I'm getting mesmerized. I just listen to you guys. I'm like, I got to ask a question. Actually, real quick, I got one from TikTok, and this might be you, Alex, and Terry. You might be able to do this. I'm a big swim bait fisherman. Do y'all have any experience throwing big glides or swim baits for them?
So
here we go. I got
let's
you.
Let's just go to camera 3 here.
Yeah. So
he's been waiting.
He didn't wait. Like, he brought props. So,
there we go.
But you wanted to ask, you mentioned wanting to ask Henry his opinion on some of that. So let's go ahead and talk about that while we've got a viewer that wants to know a little bit about the big glide baits and stuff, because this is a lot bigger. Other than the muskie trip that I went on, I've never chunked anything that big.
Well, I mean, they are like snack size to a striper. Like, I mean, in the grand scheme of what the fish that we chase eats, I mean, this is a 12-inch bait.
Yep.
It's a snack. I mean, if I could reasonably, and we're working on it, if I could reasonably get a bait with this profile 17 or 18 inches long, I would throw it all day. You would never see me throw a 12-inch bait ever again.
So you would go bigger.
Oh yeah, this is to me, this is a small bait for a 30-pounder to eat.
Okay, and how do you work it in the river, because that's where you fish mostly. So are you give us a little bit of info on that.
There's 2 schools of thought to how you would approach like fishing a glide bait. Like, I'll start with glide baits. You have like the largemouth bass approach, which is what most people think. Your slow, winding, meandering glide, and they don't like that.
Stripers do not like that.
They do not like that. If I was going to give any piece of advice to anyone who wants to fish a glide in a river for these things, I would say think of it as a giant jerkbait. That's all it is. It's a big giant jerkbait. And
Alex, talk about the reel that you probably recommend, because I'm assuming you want that super fast retrieve reel too, right?
Yeah, I run all Tranx's HGs. So I run like Tranx 300s, 400s, 7.8.
Super fast retrieves. That's all. That's all they need to know right there. How you're working your glide bait. You need a fast retrieve reel, don't you?
You do. And I think speed activates them.
Now,
just like a spot.
When you're working your glide baits, are you working it with the rod tip or the reel handle? Are you
both? I mean, that would be like asking a jerkbait fisherman whether he's fishing with a pause or not. Like, if they want it that way, then I'm gonna fish it that way. Yeah. But generally, I use a lot of rod. That's what I was talking about earlier. I've got like really bad tendonitis in this elbow, trying to get away from it. But
I've seen some guys, with the glide base, they'll crank, with the faster retrieve reel. They'll just rip it with the reel handle, give it a good crank, and they'll get that to glide. And then I see other guys are doing more like a combination of both. Like you said.
Like I do. I'll hit both of them, shoot the thing out like 6 feet to the side, bring it back, pause it. Like it's fun because you're not getting the same retrieve like ever, and you can really like play with them. Play that cat and mouse game with them a little bit more than you would other baits. That's why I really like it. You see all the fish that follow.
Oh
these
yeah,
things.
those rivers are clear.
So what's the biggest striper you've caught on one of those type of baits?
This one has actually got my last 2 PBs on it, 43 and a 41.
And by looking at it, I don't know if you can see it in the camera. Is those teeth marks? Is that teeth marks or
That's hook rash.
Yeah.
hook rash and all that? So still, that's if you can see it in the camera right there.
There you go.
That's a big old bait right there.
I love that chartreuse.
You do like that.
That's a
So
good color.
is there a time of year that the glide bait works better than others? Or is that a year-round thing?
I used to think it was a year-round thing because I would like force feed them a lot. And I've come to the conclusion after a lot of discussions with my friends that are in that kind of glide bait world, I don't think it's a spring deal. Like, we've been able to force feed them. We've been able to call a few up. But and you start thinking about it with the way the bait's working and the way they eat it in the summer. Like, they're like hyperdrive, like a spot eating a sweet bait over a brush pile. Like, they are hyperdrive in the summer and the fall. And they want to chase these things down. They want it to run from them. But like in the spring, you get a 35-pound fish that's full of eggs with its belly out to here. It doesn't want to chase. I don't think they can corner. I don't think they have the mobility. And that's when I'd start throwing, stuff more along like this line, like more of a straight line retrieve, crank down, subtlety, or A-rigs or big plastics or something.
Got the soft tail right there. So a little more action or like that.
Yeah.
Okay. Terry, now you throw a lot of top water. And so you don't throw too much like this. What are you throwing at them?
For Lake Lanier, I've thrown big swim baits and something like glide baits. And on Lanier, I don't think they're – how can I put this? It's strange. I've seen the fish react to the baits, like throwing the big 9-inch bull shads and whatnot. The fish pay more attention to those, but they seem more prone to hit a stick or like a plug, like a bomber or a redfin, than they are the swim bait on a lake. Because I was out there one night throwing a 9-inch bull shad, and I was getting follow after follow after follow after follow, but they weren't committing to it. But I would throw a bomber out there, the Magnum bomber, which is I think it's like an inch or two shorter than the big bull shad. I wouldn't get as many follows, but the fish were more apt to jump on it. They would actually grab it. And I think, like he said, in the springtime,
lean into the mic there, Terry.
What's that?
Lean into the mic, Terry.
Get a little closer to me, baby.
But I think
Get a little closer to me. We're crowded tonight.
In the springtime, like he said, the fish are laden with eggs. They don't corner as well. They don't have that that ability to turn on a 90 on a dime. So they want that easy meal. They're going to jump on that slow wobble. They're going to be like, that's the food I want. The bull shad, which is really fast and erratic. They're looking at it. They're thinking about it, but to them, it almost seems like too much work.
Okay. Now I'm gonna get to you, and I'm gonna get to Henry. Now you're more of a live bait guy. Now, so what is your typical size bait that you guys like to pull?
I mean, this time of the year, if I'm gonna use shad, 10 to 15 inches.
Sky's the limit.
Really, that big?
Or bigger if you can get them.
Yeah, biggest you can put a hook in.
The bigger the better this time.
But I bet you, Henry, you're going to be a little bit different with the fly, I would imagine. What are you throwing this time of year?
There's two schools to this. One is, do you want to catch a trophy fish or do you just want to get a bite? If you want to get a bite, you throw a little 2-inch something else.
For like the thread fin. Like
a small thread fin. But if you want a trophy fish, then you throw what's called something like if you guys any of the people listening at home can look up a fly tire by the name of Bob Popovic's, and he has a fly called a hollow beast fly, BEAST, and you can tie these things. Well, Alex, did Connor ever show you the fly he was throwing where he caught his fish when he was fishing the river up in Virginia?
Yeah, we had a lot of fun with that story. I actually got to watch him nail one here on that thing. It was cool. I like the action on this.
Yeah, it's pretty spectacular. Danny, you know what? Hold on. I happen to have
tell you a dirty secret, Henry. I bought a 9-weight for the summer.
Oh,
nice. I'm going to show you a small beast. This is not a hollow. This is half the size of what these guys are throwing. let me just take this out of the package for you and show you what I'm talking about.
There you go.
Nice.
Now compared that looks very similar to the streamer I was throwing for muskie up in Tennessee.
Well, you know what? I'm going to just show you real quick the difference between what I would say a small shad fly. This is not the something else, but this is something similar, just so you can see the difference of what we're talking about here.
Oh, that's a huge difference.
Hold on.
So that one in your hand, the small one you say is kind of mimicking about the small one's about a 2-inch.
Yes.
So we can kind of compare it
That's
in
a
the
thread
thing.
fin and gizzard shad.
Thread
This is
fin
a
and
thread
that's
fin,
good.
and this is more of a gizzard.
Okay. All right. And so I imagine you've got to throw that on different rods or using the same
100%.
rod.
You cannot throw this fly on anything less than a 10.
Okay.
You
On
need
a
a
10
10 weight. And the ones that our buddy who ties these beautifully, his name is Keegan Corcoran. He's here in Georgia, a local guy who ties some of these for friend of Alex and mine's. And you need a 10 or an 11 weight to throw this fly. This one that I'm showing you here, you could throw on probably on a 9 or a 10 weight. This fly, you would want to throw on an 8 weight. Just, this is just a small little 2-inch, 2.5-inch long thread fin shad.
Right. And so small one for the numbers, big one for the trophies. Do you have clients that actually come out and say, listen, Henry, I want you to try to put me on the biggest fish? And you're going to say, okay, well, this is what we're going to throw today. Or do you kind of recommend them? Let's get in some numbers first.
So any client that comes out with me that says, I want to catch a trophy, I immediately give them Jeremy's number.
Oh, is that what you do?
Yeah.
I understand it.
I can't, here's the thing. If somebody really says, I want to go trophy fishing, I'm going to take them out probably between now and the second week of April. And they have to be understanding that they're going to throw a big fly. And at the end of the day, they may not even get a bite. Okay. Mm-hmm. Because it's you're fishing for a personal best. Now I will tell you, when we were out, I told you I took those guys out 3 weeks ago from Orvis and Cy Angler. We were throwing a little something else 2 inches long, and we came upon some birds diving and 5 loons going crazy on the water. And we threw a slow sinking intermediate line with a 2-inch something else, and we got a striper that was pushing 22 pounds. So
what's the biggest striper you've ever caught on a fly rod? Just out of my, I want to know. My curiosity.
I got a 28 on Lanier, probably about 17 years ago. Alex, you'll be happy to know on a do you pronounce it Rapala or Rapala?
This is an important question.
I say Rapala.
Okay,
That's
I say
what
Rapala.
I say.
What do you say?
Rapala.
Okay, it's the same with guys that say crappie instead of crappy.
Yeah,
enjoy the crappie.
The Midwest guys, I think the guys in the Midwest call it a Rapala.
Yeah,
They do.
a Rapala.
Anyway, I was fishing a bridge. I was fishing a bridge in Brooklyn, New York. And I was fishing under the girders of the bridge. I would walk out under the bridge at night, and the lights from the bridge for the cars that went over the bridge, the lights would create a shadow. And we used to catch giant stripers. This was before I was fly fishing. This was back in the 80s. And I got a 46 pounder on a Rapala, 46, 48, right in there.
What's your biggest, Jeremy?
The biggest striper that I've ever caught in North Georgia was on Lake Lanier, 35 pounds.
What's your biggest all time?
42.
42.
Keep coming out of Tennessee.
Out of Tennessee. All right, Terry, how about you?
My biggest from Lanier is 41, and I've got, I don't know, between 8 and 11 over 35 out of Lanier.
Okay, at night.
Yeah.
What about you, Alex? Because you're over there, you're throwing some big numbers out.
My biggest is that one I got this summer, 43.
43. And where was it caught?
Virginia.
What are those? Virginia.
Virginia.
Okay.
But if you go on his Instagram, he's got a very impressive collection of 40-inch fish, 40-plus inch fish in his Instagram.
Sometimes it's very hard to ask people that question. I don't like when I went up.
Were you just trying to give me the snap reply on that?
You know what?
East Coast.
Yeah,
Alex,
once I said the question, I went, yeah, Appalachia.
Alex, your secret is safe with me, my friend.
I got it. And sometimes I ask the questions before I actually think, and I'm like, he's not going to tell me. But again, those are impressive weights. Now, yours was recent.
Mm-hmm.
When was your biggest? Was
2015 or 16.
2015, 16. And how about yours? It's been a while. Let's talk about the Lanier one.
It was 2011.
All right, Henry, all you guys like that. I've heard a lot of stories about the Lanier stripers going down, not getting a lot of size to them. You know, we went through that, apparently the phase, and now their weights are coming back up. Is that what you're seeing, Henry, with the weights, the average weights?
I've actually had, I've probably got more fish this December and January, up until around the 10th of February. I've gotten more fish over 10 by a 3 or 4, maybe even a 5-to-1 margin. I've had 3 fish hit 20 on fly this winter for my clients, and I've had numbers of 14, 15, 16-pound fish.
That's good.
There's gonna be some fish well over 30 caught this spring.
Why do you think?
Lanier.
Yeah. Why do you think we had that little bit of a lull and now we're coming back up? Any explanation for that?
How much time you got?
Let's go.
There could be like 50 different things.
It was a litany of like the perfect storm of many different factors that all came together from 2016-ish to 2018-19 between rain, no thermocline, temperature,
gill maggots.
Gill maggots, DNR stocking methods. They pretty much admitted to like, listen, we had late rearing some years, so we were just pulling up the one ramp and going bleh, and dumping them all in where all the brim and herring and everything were shallow, gobbling them up. It was
when we had that
like
drought.
I said, how much time you got?
When we had that drought in 2007 or 8.
Yeah.
Well, to me, that was some, and even past that, that was some really good fishing on Lake Lanier. But so that goes back to what you were saying about the rain, all the runoff and stuff. It's got to affect the water quality, which goes back to affecting the growth of our fish and everything. So it's something to the rain. I mean, I know we have to have it, but just the excessive amount like we've had at times the last few years, all that runoff, man, it can't be good.
That was when they started pulling all the water out of the lake.
Yeah.
Because those were the years like 2016
when
to 2019 was when I was
or wasn't
still
calibrated right. Or
pretty much a trout fisherman. And like that was when we caught all our big fish because they were running the hooch like
wide open
for years, just pulling all that oxygenated water out of the middle of the lake.
And one thing that I've noticed, I seem to be the only one that feels this way, but I've noticed I really think that the big fish needed a shad kill in the wintertime to put on as much weight as they could. Just like you got bears. What do? They pack on all that weight and they go into hybrid. I think the stripers, to get the truly big stripers over 30 pounds on Lanier and good numbers, I think we have to have heavy shad kills. I think that's when those big stripers put on enough weight and enough girth and enough size and enough fat to survive a summer being stretched.
How long do you think it's been since we've had one?
2014 I mean, we've had little tiny, but it's since we've had like a scorched earth type, shad kill. 2014.
Which and the times I've fished shad kills, it makes it really tough right then.
Yeah,
but it's going to help it for.
But on artificial at night, shad kills are.
Well, and like if you like to cut bait, if you like to cut, a lot of people catch them on cut bait that during that time. But for me, it's not for the way I like to fish. It's not good at that current time.
At the time while it's happening,
but later on, it's definitely going to help everybody.
Because you say at Carter's, there's almost too much bait.
There's too much bait, but the problem is it's herring. It's not threads. It's alewives. The water's not going to get cold enough to kill the alewives.
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
That's the problem with that.
Hey, Danny, I don't know if you can see this. Alex, you're going to love this picture. Let me see if I can line this up for you.
All right, there we go.
There we go.
Yeah.
Can you see?
Who is that?
Is that you, Henry?
That was 1982.
And he's got the wool stocking cap
wool
and everything.
red cap,
You look like you just stepped out of
Mustache.
Montauk.
I was going to say
The
like a
staff,
Wisconsin
too.
boy or something like that. Yeah, look at that.
That's the most Yankee-looking surf picture.
Love it. Bob the garbage
So,
man.
so how did
Yes.
you lose the
Yes, that's
campaign
right.
for brawny paper towel with that?
Yeah, that's who he looks like. He looks like the Brony paper towel guy right there. For
Getting
sure.
over
Chunka,
with mooks
chunka.
over here.
I'll be
That was
doggone. You's a good looking fella right there.
1982.
Like,
That was my
For a lure.
that was
A
my
lure.
When was
first
that?
big fit. That was in
What-
Cape Cod.
what year was that?
1982, Cape Cod, Massachusetts,
I was
on the
10.
beach. I
I
caught
was
that
10.
fish. I caught that fish in a pair of waders.
You weren't even born then.
What year?
1982?
No, I wouldn't.
Yeah,
Yeah,
listen
I
to
was
that.
I was -8.
I was born.
You were born. Yeah, I know.
My
That's
parents
like-
have not
-3.
met yet.
I was born right there. That's interesting. Now you mentioned gill maggots, and I know every time we talk stripers or somebody comes in, I hear the term gill maggots and all that. What are you seeing on the water right now as far as that, Henry?
I'm not seeing
Okay.
the gill maggots anymore, and I think that's I kind of agree with Terry and Jeremy. I think water quality, which I think is what caused the gill maggots, that along with, whether the, salinity did whatever it did, I think that's what hurt our big fish.
Okay, so you're saying poor water quality contributed to the gill maggots.
I think, there's no question.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, how about you guys? Any of you
I
seeing
still
them?
see them, but I don't see them in the numbers that we did. I mean, and you like we were talking. I can't remember who I was talking to about
Used
this
to
the
catch
other day,
fish
but
that
it
were
was at a
choked with.
point where the gill maggots were so bad you didn't even want to grab the fish.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're like, "Oh my god, it's
Now,
disgusting."
Is
you
this
know?
just a lake thing? Did
See,
you see
I
that in the
don't-
river?
I don't subscribe to that. And let me organize my thought on this.
Organize that thought, man.
I intuitively, if you have a bunch of maggots in your
Big word.
if you have a bunch of maggots in your lungs, you're not going to grow very good.
Yeah.
But by the same token, like I go downtown and you're catching 25 to 30 pound fish. You're completely ate up with them.
Right.
So while I want to say it's the gill lice, I have a hard time reconciling that fact with fish that have worse quality, that have worse water quality, that have the same level of infection, that are growing to like 3 times the
Now,
size.
can I play the devil's advocate?
Yeah,
Is it-
no,
Yeah,
totally. I want to
Make
discuss
sure
this.
you get close up to the microphone, Mr.
Is
Devil.
it
right
the
here.
older fish that are becoming more susceptible and they're getting overrun by gill maggots in their later stage of life versus the younger fish who seem to be more resistant to them,
That's a really good point that I will pay attention to.
Because I noticed
So-
some of the bigger fish that I've caught in the last year and a half had more maggots present than the smaller fish,
Okay, that never crossed my mind.
That's why I was
Well,
just curious.
Terry,
if
if you
noticed
think about it, that fish has been in the water longer though. Like he's had more time to pick them up,
yeah,
and they
possibly.
were there. They were there, especially when the gill lice first got in Lanier, and they exploded.
Yeah, the gill lice, when they first showed up, they affected everything. It was little fish, big fish. They were all overrun with them. But the newer fish seem to be a lot more, they just deal with them, and they're not getting over. You see one here, a couple in their mouths, but it's like they're just living with it. It's just, it's just a part of life for them now.
I happen
Those
to
first fish
have-
got decimated.
I have a
Go
very
ahead.
good relationship with the DNR. And when we first started seeing them, I had multiple conversations. And the conclusion from the DNR was we don't know enough about it. And all our neighboring lakes from other states that have had it don't know enough about it either. There's no definitive answer as to where this started, what caused it, blah, blah, blah. But the one thing everybody from the DNR told me was that every lake that was affected by this lost their big fish. As a generalization, most lakes lost their big fish due to when the gill maggots exploded. They did come back several years later, but guys from Alabama, Tennessee, I have friends on Smith Mountain Lake, experienced the same thing. They still caught fish 15, 18 pounds, but everything 25 and up just disappeared.
They lost that big class of fish. What about on Carter's?
I've never seen a gill maggot on Carter's Lake. Never seen one on a fish.
Jeremy, I'm telling you, gill maggots are scared of the Mullinax.
Is that what it is? I know it. It's the power. It's the power of the guys up there
Alewives eat 'em.
backwoods and
But it
all
might
that.
be because since they're not allowed to use herring technically on Carters yet, I think maybe the herring were the ones that transported it. Netting herring from one body of water, selling them in a bait shop, and I think it was bait shops that spread it,
and
obviously.
I think our water quality is good because they move. It's a small lake and they move so much water constant that
And
there's
I don't
not
think
time
it'll
for.
hurt your fishery like it did ours is bad because your fish, like we said, your fish for whatever reason they grow to 30 pounds really quick, but once they get to that 35 at Carters for whatever reason they just disappear.
Yeah,
You are a 20-pound factory up there now.
Transporting fish can to different bodies of water can hurt. Like
Yeah.
Alex and I, we didn't realize when we were catching trout above Morgan Falls and live lining them below Morgan Falls, we didn't know that what was going to happen to the stripers.
Well, there's a lot of a lot of states.
Because I know that.
There's a lot of states where you're not allowed to transport your boat from one body of water to another.
California is
because
like
of
that.
Yeah, and a lot of
California
your
is
New
like
England
that.
ones.
Midwest.
Yeah,
because of the mussels, and you have to clean your boat. It has to be, and you have to get it scrubbed with a certain bleach, and then that has to be documented to get a stamp to be allowed to fish certain lakes.
That's right. That's right.
The,
Pull up Peter
the
W's
lakes
comment.
that have the invasive mussels, the quaggas and the zebras, their spore is extremely robust. You've got to take a heated pressure washer and blow out the bilge of the boat to eradicate them before you can move.
Right.
Listen, the same thing has happened on the trout streams with whirling disease.
Yeah.
You can't fish in a pair of waders that has felt
really?
in certain streams.
Okay, you got that comment up. Peter W says, not sure about gill lice, but there's a type of copepod.
Copepod.
Huh?
A copepod.
Copepod. There you go. That I regularly see in the mouths of stripers in Hartwell.
That would be a gill lice or gill maggot.
Well, that's what I was going to say.
That's the same thing.
When we went to Hartwell and fished the SBC tournament, we was catching fish with what I thought was gill maggots. They look just like the same thing at Lanier.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that's what he's referring to there.
I noticed the fish at Hartwell when we were there for the SBC. They seem to have a lot more than the Lanier fish did.
Yeah, I'll agree with that.
Those gill lice, when you put them in a red sauce, they're actually quite good.
Oh, yeah. Okay, tell us about that. Yeah,
Henry, nobody but us could start a conversation about maggots.
That's right. Well,
Yeah.
But I hear it every single time.
Danny
really
heard
wanted
red
you to
sauce
think
and
about
he
that
was ready to eat.
Listen, Henry, I'll eat anything once, so I'll try it. You can put enough sauce on anything and make it good.
Listen, gill maggot Chiappino is one of my favorites.
Hey, there you go. Let's make a date.
They're
We'll
just
do
like
it.
little nuggets.
Oh man.
I'd love to do. I want to take this time too, Henry, to let's give you a chance before we get too far on. I want you to promote this big thing around here is your book on stripers right there. A lot of information in it, and I want to give you an opportunity to shout that out a little bit.
Well, I appreciate it. I just happen to have a copy. I don't know how.
Oh yeah, look at that.
But
Got
it's
the Georgia
called
hat and everything.
Fly Fishing for Freshwater Stripers. And it's a complete guide to tactics, tackle, and finding fish. And I will just tell you, the long and the short of it is, even though it says fly fishing, the truth is, of the 9 or 10 chapters in the book, there's only about a chapter, maybe a chapter and a half on fly fishing. The rest of it is basically, if you're living somewhere in the United States, whether it's a river or a lake that has freshwater stripers, it will tell you, at least start you off in the right direction of how to find and plan an attack to catch these things, whether you're using a fly rod or a spinning rod. Now, we don't go into the lures very much. The baits that we use artificial, it's mostly fly, but I would say 90% of the book talks about the history of the stripers, how they started, how they got in there, what their patterns are, all the different patterns, times of the year, what structure to look for in the river. And, when I wrote this thing, I really didn't know Alex too well, or I would have easily called him to shake out some of his wisdom to help with the river section. So most of the river stuff I just made up I'm kidding. I did speak to some people that fish the rivers, but Rob Smith from the Fish Hawk was very helpful. And there's a gentleman named Bill Butts out in Missouri who fishes a lot of rivers. And he was able to, I fish the rivers too, but I'm certainly nowhere near as talented in finding fish in a river as, say, guys like Alex or Connor, one of my buddies that are just, these guys are just, if you want to know something about river fishing, if you take that gray sweatshirt that Alex is wearing and pull it down a little, you'll see gill slits on the side of his neck.
There you go. I got you.
All right. I'm just telling you.
That's why I brought the hoodie.
That's why he brought the hoodie. I want to ask every one of you guys this, and Henry, since you're up, we'll start. I want to go from Jeremy on around. What is it about a striped bass to you, Henry, that makes it, your target species? What do you love about the fish?
That's a super easy question for me. I love fly fishing, and I love to catch fish with dots, like trout, all kinds of trout. But I'm a dyed-in-the-wool saltwater guy. I grew up in New York City, fishing basically the coast of Maine down to the Jersey Shore and every beach in between. And so I'm a saltwater guy. And what I love is the fact that we can be 250 to 300 miles inland of the coast and have a saltwater fishery right here at our footsteps without having to make a long drive and catch something that powerful. I don't care if it's on fly or it's on an artificial bait or you're pitching a herring or trolling bait. I just love the idea that we can have a saltwater experience in the North Georgia mountains.
Well, that's a good answer. What about you, Jeremy?
Yeah, same thing. My favorite kind of fishing, saltwater fishing. And this is, even though I didn't grow up like Henry did on saltwater, I still love saltwater fishing. And when I go to the lake, I want to catch the biggest fish I can catch. So, the stripers are the closest thing we have to saltwater fishing in North Georgia. So that's why I've always leaned towards that. But with the guide service, I do try to, cater to people, or I want to feel like I'm go more for trophy fish. But as a guide, when you get families with kids and stuff like that, you can't put all your eggs in one basket. Mm-hmm. There's times where, we might go try to catch a big one first 2 hours. If it ain't happening and I got kids on the boat, they just want to go catch bass or whatever, we'll do that too.
Right.
So I've had to be more versatile on the guiding side of it, where with me, when I go, I want to catch one of those 30s that Terry's talking about at Lanier.
That's the biggest and the baddest. What about you, Terry?
For me, it's like a Lamborghini. I fish for stripers. The majority of the stripers I caught over 30 pounds have been on bass tackle. Size 3,000 reels, 20-pound braid with, 12-pound leader, 15-pound leader, and it's just, to best a fish that was never designed, with that on tackle that was never designed for that fish is just a thrill you can't top. When you hook a 30-pound fish on a, 7-foot bass spinning rod, medium fast action, like a flipping rod or something like that. Not even a flipping stick. I'm talking, just a fast action rod, 3,000 size reel, and you're looking at that spool empty.
Yeah.
Hoping and praying you're going to be able to turn that fish before you get down to the backing. There's nothing like it.
Yeah. When you have to run it, you have to run it down with the boat.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
That's the thrill.
Bass are fun. I love catching bass. I do quite a bit of bass fishing, but the bass fight is taking place right there under your feet at the boat, more or less, But stripers, it's, when you hook that fish and you got that fish and you start shaking and you start out first, it starts, I just want to see it, God. Just let me see it. Just let me see it.
Lord, let me
and
see
then
that
when you
fish.
see it, it's like, oh, God, please
Lord,
let me get it in the
fish.
net.
Yeah.
Please let me get it in the net. And then when you looking at that fish, that, that 44-inch fish that you caught on a jerkbait this big, it's just second to none.
I'm sure there's been people out on the lake around us before when we've caught, like in Tennessee, when we caught that 35-pounder at the SBA tournament. I'm sure people was like, they sound like a bunch of kids over there, man. We was hooping, hollering, celebrate. We do this a long time, guys, and it doesn't get old. No. People ask me, do you get burnt out on it? I get frustrated with it at times, but there's nothing like what Terry's talking about. You won't experience anything else like that in North Georgia unless you go to the salt.
I got you.
I put out a video today. I caught a 15-pounder, and I'm hooting and hollering like a retard. You swear to God, I caught a 40-pounder in that video.
What about you, Alex?
I think for me, it kind of goes back to what Jeremy was saying in a different way. It's just the ferocity and the power, and like what Terry's saying, like they can beat you. Like no offense to the bass guys, I enjoy catching spots. I think largemouth are overgrown sunfish that are a waste of time. But
there you go. That's an opinion. All right.
There we go. You just screwed me on the lake. I just want you to know. You just screwed every center console boat on the lake.
That's right. Yeah.
The amount of viewers just went down by half.
Wait a minute. Hey, before you finish
I just got to make my shameless plug.
Before you finish your thought, I want to say I love bass fishing and I love bass fishermen. Go ahead, Alex.
Okay, there you go. Smart move. Smart business move.
Spotted bass and shoal bass.
Yeah, don't come near my boat, please.
Yeah, there you go.
But I just
I'm one of you guys.
like come on, it's a 2-pound spot. Like it can't beat you. Like there's like what's the real?
See, I feel like for bass fishermen, it's got to be more of the figuring out how to catch them and how many you can catch, because we have a lot of striper lakes, guys, where it's just numbers and it's all about how many fish you can catch,
Right.
but I guess we're kind of spoiled in a way, because Terry come up through a time at Lanier when it was amazing. I've seen some good fishing at Carter's, big fish, what you've experienced in the river with big fish. I mean, everybody don't have that, so
true.
I mean, I can see, but I'm like you, man. I'm not a bass fisherman. I just can't get into it because I don't know. I do what I do. It's just what I like to do.
Yeah,
I'm gonna remind everybody I love me some green fish.
Okay, there you go.
I got no problem with a mixed bag. I got no problem with a mixed bag of stripers, spots, and largemouth on a fly.
I got a smart business move. But Peter W says basically what you're saying. The fight is the big draw. Hooking that fish.
And the size.
And the eats.
The way they
I
eat,
get to see that in a very different way than you guys do. Because I mean, I'm fishing like when a 40-pound fish moves 30 yards to eat this thing in 2.5 feet of gin clear water right at the side of the boat and just come unglued on it and just shower you in water when he eats it. Like it's come on.
The thrill of it,
man. I could almost like picture being there. That was so.
Come on. It's just a basketball sized white void to open up at the side of the boat. Like the only thing that is close that I've experienced is like Jimbo's wolf packs of spotted bass. That is cool. And that's like something I find very cool too, because it's the eats, it's the power. You get to watch them behave. Like it's dragging a DT6 up a rock ledge to catch a 2-pound largemouth. It's just like,
so
why would you do that when you can do this?
So watching them on live scope is not what you're talking. I mean, that's because I've actually heard some people say, some bass fishermen that have fished a long time, say they hate live scope because it's kind of took away the way they have always fished and stuff. So what you're saying though is the water you're fishing, being able to see those fish eat, which we see it sometimes at Carter's too, when the fish are up high and feeding, and there's nothing like watching a striper hit a big live bait or artificial,
and
whatever.
Like we get to play cat and mouse with them too, because like Henry was saying about the laid up tarpon, like we get to see, I see like 95% of the fish that I catch well before they eat. Like you're seeing them come off the bank, peel out of the log jam, and there's like 12 25-pounders roll out of a log jam, and like you get to see their body language.
Yeah, I said where?
Virginia.
Yeah.
But
Alex,
you get to see them.
Alex, I'm taking you carp fishing this year on the fly rod.
Yeah, he says that's very, that's a very cool thing. But what you're describing too is almost like what the musky guys say.
Yeah.
It's about they started talking about the move, and I was like, what is the move? But that's just making a fish react and commit to where you can see it. And sometimes with those guys, they might not catch that fish, but they see it, and the fact that they can make that fish move excites them. Mm-hmm. And then if the fish actually hits, it's a bonus. Yeah.
But
so Danny, you're talking about that. Yes, sir.
I'm going to just tell you, and I'm not disagreeing with any of these guys, but there are certain lakes. Our lake on Lanier isn't like this, but when you go on lakes with a lot of vegetation, watching a mouse pattern get ripped off the surface on a lily pad by a 3-4 pound largemouth, I don't know that's as I think that's as exciting as any topwater bite you're going to see. Right. I just don't think our lake here in North Georgia has that opportunity. But I mean, my buddies out in California, largemouth bass fish on the topwater stuff, and I've gotten to watch some videos, and I can tell you the hair on the back of my neck stands up.
Yeah, well, I think that's just something ingrained in us as fishermen, just that explosion and stuff like that. But in all aspects, but in all aspects of it, it's the attack of the fish. It's watching that fish, its predatory instincts kick in and take off for that.
I made it do that.
Well, that's true.
I made it do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Now let me run this question by you, Henry. We'll start with you again. The future of striper fishing. What's it look like in the Southeast?
Listen, it's the fact. I think it's as long as the DNR supports the stocking programs, and we all need to get behind the DNR. Love or not or not showing them love, whichever way you think. Just these are the guys that are going to continue to give us that fishery. So you got to show your love to the DNR, whether you agree with everything they do or they don't, because obviously, there's some bureaucratic stuff in there. It's a government agency. But believe me when I tell you, these guys are working as hard as they can to make the fishery as good as they possibly can on the budget that they get, which isn't very much. That's number one. Mm-hmm. Number two is I will tell you that I am seeing more and more center consoles and striper fishermen on our lake the last 4 years than I've ever seen before. So I think the future is good, which means the pressure is going to be bad. Yeah. And we're going to need more fish. My big thing on the future of striper fishing, at least on Lanier, is we need 15 fish per acre, not 10 fish per acre. And if there's any bass fishermen out there listening, I'm sorry, but we need 15 fish per acre because it's gotten harder. Okay.
I'll comment on that. Ryan talks a lot about us having too much bait on Lanier, and 15 fish per acre would be bait control.
That's correct.
It could help.
The last thing I'll add to your question, Danny, is Lake Lanier is ground zero for fly fishing for stripers in, you ready for this? In the United States.
Really?
Freshwater striper fishery throughout the entire country. We have the biggest population of fly rod fishermen for striped bass. We have over 100 boats that will get on Lake Lanier, not at the same time, but we have 100 boats that fish Lake Lanier for stripers every year. And matter of fact, Alpharetta Outfitters, which is a fly shop down in Alpharetta, is going to be hosting I want to say it's their 4th annual Southern Striper fly rod tournament. It's all catch and release. They're going to have 30 fly boats. All monies that they collect go to Project Healing Waters, which is to help vets that come back with all sorts of physical and mental disabilities. We get them into fly fishing. We actually are going to have 8 boats going out before the tournament, fly fishing, taking these vets out and fly fishing with these vets on Lake Lanier. And I'm just telling you, there's no other lake across the United States that has that many participants on a fly rod for stripers. So that's I think amazing. Well,
yeah, that's awesome. You mentioned Lanier. It's a talking about now. It's a fly fishing destination for stripers. It's a spotted bass destination. It just kind of really shows what kind of special lake that Lanier is. As far as that. So that's I did not know that, Henry. So that's that's good to know, and I'm glad you shouted out that tournament.
And as long as we keep Jeremy off the lake, there'll be more stripers for the rest of us.
That's what I was going to say.
Keep them at Carter's.
Hey,
I'll turn them back, man.
Yeah, I turn them back. What about you with Carter's? How's the future looking for you? What do you think which way it's going?
Yeah, I think we're starting to see smaller fish coming on. Which is a good thing. Like Henry said, the pressure, we're seeing more people now than we ever have. So, which is good and bad. If like he said, if we can compensate for it with more fish or whatever. I think the biggest thing is just be smart. Don't go to what we consider a trophy fishery and keep 20, 25, 30-pound fish to eat. There's other things, there's other places you can go and other fisheries that will present that opportunity. But to go somewhere and to kill a 20, 30-pound fish to eat it, in my opinion, it's not smart on anybody's part that would want to keep going back and catching them and catching bigger ones. I mean, I've always said the only way you're going to have 20s is to turn 15s back. The only way you're going to have 30s is to turn 20s back. I mean, it's just part of it. So that's the thing I would encourage.
There was a gentleman who's no longer alive. He's one of the founding fathers of North American fly fishing. His name was Lee Wolf. His wife is still alive, Joan Wolf. They are two of the iconic figures in fly fishing. Lee Wolf was quoted as saying, "A game fish is too valuable to be caught only once."
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm gonna start using.
You gonna start using that?
Damn right.
That's right. So
I think we should put that on a T-shirt.
We can do that. We can do that. What about you, Terry, and what you're seeing? The future as far as it holds for you.
I've been fishing. I've fished so many different lakes over this past year looking for stripers, and I honestly feel like. Do you remember in the movie Fight Club when he's following around trying to find Brad Pitt? Remember, he keeps getting there too late, too late, too late. That's almost what it feels like to me. Like I'm arriving at this fishery too late. The heyday seems to be past for most fisheries. I mean, even Tennessee's still a great fishery. Tennessee still puts out big fish, but it's not what it was 20 years ago. Lanier's not what it was 10 years ago. Carter's is probably the premier for decent, good size stripers still in Lake Lanier, but it's even waned a little bit. And I just think with the increased fishing pressure, and I mean, I know this is a hot button topic, but the climate is definitely changing. Now, whether we created it, I don't really think. I think it's just a natural cycle of the earth, but things are getting warmer. And stripers are a cold water fish trying to survive in a warm freshwater environment. I think in 20 years, you're going to see some of the lakes in the South that are borderline right now able to support places like Oconee, the Sinclairs and stuff like that. The Juliets are not going to have stripers in them in 20 years. The DNR is just not going to keep putting them in there, for them to reach 4 or 5 pounds.
That's interesting.
Yeah, exactly. Hybrid, you're going to see a lot of lakes switch over to hybrids.
What about you, river guy? Especially, rivers are kind of, the environment of a river is a lot different than a lake, and changes, kind of in the environment, stuff like that. What are you seeing, or what do you think will happen in the future?
Seems like we're on a declining slope of positivity here.
Yeah, so
I'm not positive about what I do. I'm not. I've watched it fall off. The fisheries I fish here, I've watched, to Terry's point, I've watched upstream siltation, runoff, raise the temperatures to the point where I don't think that downtown fishery is going to sustain and put out fish can reliably over 20 pounds for much longer. Rivers have been far more dramatically impacted by social media than lakes have, because there's far less surface area, and there's far less locations to fish. And I know I was a contributor to that for some portion, so I'm glad I'm not taken anymore.
Right.
It was a lot that had a lot to do with it, and that's why I don't put fish up anymore.
So pressure, a lot of the stuff you're talking about is a lot of man-made or man-caused situations.
Yes,
these places are delicate.
They're
delicate was the word I was looking for when I was trying
delicate.
to talk about the rivers and stuff.
Hey, Danny.
Yes, sir.
Rivers are the new toy for striper fishing here in the South. That's become the shiny new toy that everybody wants, where everybody's got jet boats today, and they're doing more and more. So, rivers need to be rested. Just like when you flats fish, you can't go to the same flat day in and day out and expect that you're going to see and catch fish. And rivers are just way more sensitive to fishing pressure than lakes are. And that's what I think a big part of, unfortunately, what Alex is feeling, which is why he holds driver's licenses in 4 states now.
Right. Absolutely. Well, what's the solution?
There's not one.
Yeah.
There's not. It's just, what am I going to do? Like, complain the way my dad, my grandpa, they all dealt with the same thing.
Yeah.
Bigger population of people that are more interested, have more means, more capability, and it's just something I can do what I can do to like educate people that I know within my circle, but I can't really like affect anything. Like, I mean, 30 guys want to show up at a boat ramp, keep within their legal limit of fish, and who am I to say something to them? They're perfectly within their legal rights. Like, I think if you want to affect some things, especially in terms of DNR stocking rates, how many fish per acre we need, the people that really care about it need to open up those conversations with DNR, with wildlife resources, have that continuing back and forth. Like, I don't think people realize exactly how much they value anecdotal fishing reports, having consistent people that they know have been on these fisheries for 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years and have seen these changes. Like, they depend on us for the eyes on the water feedback and give that to them. Be a stakeholder in your fishery.
Okay.
Take care of it.
Yeah.
Hey, Danny, here's a problem. So here's this, and this may be for another day, but here's a problem. It's exactly what Alex is saying.
Right there,
As a guide, and Jeremy probably feels the same way, the more I put on social media, the more my phone rings. The more I put on social media, the harder I make my fishing. What do I do?
5 grams.
Yeah. It's kind of tough. And again, we're big on the social media too. So yeah, that does play a problem. But I think also too, maybe we can start using it to educate a little bit more. I guess that's really the only way to do it. We've been going about 2 hours now. Paul, you got something?
I don't know. Yeah, we can go more if you want.
It's up to you guys. What I was going to do.
I was going to say just kind of social media in general.
There's no secrets anymore.
There's very few secrets. Like, word gets out quick. And there's a lot of people that are kind of looking for the easy validation.
Well, yeah, and that's what I was getting at. Was what I don't understand is, like, I'm just using this for example. Let's say Alex posts some pictures of some fish in the river. If Alex called me and invited me to go with him to go try to catch some big fish, that'd be great. But for me to go try to figure out where you're at and go sit on top of you, that's just not. I couldn't do that because I wouldn't want it done to me.
But
I'm not going to do it to him.
But there's
guys that will. But I think people need to take that in consideration. If I was on something, would I want somebody to do this to me? Mm-hmm. Put yourself in their shoes, because I'm just bringing this out because I've had situations where it's like, man, there's no respect whatsoever.
That is a big thing in all aspects of fishing right now.
You're not going to smash that like when you see the hero shot on Instagram,
right? It's really what I want to do. I want to give each one of you guys kind of like your own little chance to say, I want you to first shout out your services, your social media. Again, I want to make sure everybody gets that, but maybe like a closing thought on stripers. However you want to say it, what you love about it, anything, it's open mic right here on that. And Alex, we're going to start with you and work our way back to Henry, because I want Henry to kind of close the show with his thoughts like that. But make sure you shout out your social media if you want to, your services if you want to. But again, you guys, I will say this: I'm not a striper guy. I don't striper fish a lot, but you guys are a very educated group of anglers right here. And I know you care about the sport and the fish itself. So I've been from the bass world to you guys. I've been very impressed with how you're presenting everything tonight. And I know you guys love it. And it's always great to see you guys here, but I'm going to give you the mic.
Well, Alex Green Fishing on Instagram. I do post some stuff on my stories and stuff like that. Not a whole lot of action going on over there. But I definitely like to shout out like all my friends that are, in my little network group that are all tight-lipped and awesome dudes. Most notably Johnny Mills, Connor Lee, and my trout homie Phil. Yeah. We'll get you on the stripers eventually. Right. Maybe we'll get you to put down the trout rod. But and I guess just my closing thought is, I just love these fish. I love them, and it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. I've chased these things all over, met so many of the best people that I've had the chance to, you know, share a boat with, share conversations, share thoughts with. They've got me through difficult points in my life, you know, being able to just go chase them for 10 days and forget about everything else because these damn fish just won't eat, and I want to figure out how to make them do
right,
it.
absolutely, yeah.
You know, they're just incredible fish, an incredible resource, and a lot of incredible people are in that world.
That's awesome. All right, Terry, what about you, buddy?
For me, right now I've been focusing heavily on the YouTube Jersey Catch Fishing Adventures. My thing lately has been taking my show on the road and trying different bodies of water and seeing if I can crack the code in lakes I've never seen before and never fished. You know, not a bragging moment, but I've kind of conquered Lanier, and Lanier's been like, you know, it's like, you know, the back of my hand now, you know. So I like showing up at different bodies of water and plying my trade and see if I could have success in a place that I've never seen before. And there's some other things in the works. I've actually been talking to a few people. I did do some part-time guiding years ago, and it's a funny thing, you know, when I was growing up, my grandfather wanted me to become a machinist. He's like, you're really creative. He's like, you're good at, you know, building things and creating things. He's like, and lo and behold, I became a machinist. And he had one more wish for me, was to become a professional fisherman at some point. You know, I've been fishing for stripers for 30 years now almost. And I've been hardcore fishing for 40 years, from Canada to, you know, Alabama, everywhere. I fish for everything at some point or another. So I'm starting to talk to certain people about perhaps guiding, but not as my own guide, probably a subcontractor for other bigger guides when they have overflow and whatnot, because my work schedule is a little more free. So expect to see that in the near future.
Yeah,
I'm not rushing that. You know what I mean? I'm building my name back up because I had disappeared a few years ago from the limelight. You know, the social media thing was great at first, and I didn't expect some of the backlash from some haters, so I kind of disappeared. And, you know, now that I've kind of grown older and
wiser,
exactly. My skin's a little bit thicker these days, so I'm putting my name back out there, building back my reputation. You know, my reputation is good amongst people that have been around for a long time. You know, most of the guides and whatnot on Lanier all know me, but a lot of the people who've showed up in the past 5-6 years are like, who's this guy? You know?
Yeah, absolutely. I got you.
So I'm just building my name back up, getting my feet wet again, and, you know, trying to ease into that whole transition. But right now, my main focus is YouTube. Jersey Catch Fishing Adventures. I actually put out a video today from Lake Russell, striper fishing.
Okay, awesome.
Check it out.
All right, Jeremy.
So our website, for anybody that wants to follow us or on social media or get any more information on our guide service, it's backwoodsfishingguide.com. And we're on Instagram. We're on Facebook too, Backwoods Fishing, for anybody that wants to follow us on there. And like I said, we're, you know, call and book a trip.
Book a trip.
Right now is a good, if you're not already planning, if you want to do some trophy fishing for a big one, right now is a good time for that. I feel like May and June, the summertime, is a good time to just go catch fish, you know, a mixed bag and have. So, you know, we're always ready. I'll give a shout out to, you know, two of the guys that's been working with us, Russ Dees and Lynn Slay. They both have been working with us. So if I'm booked and you want to go fishing, I can take care of it.
There you go. That's
how
awesome.
How many boats are in your?
Well, we got Russ and Lynn. Lynn's full time. I'm full time. Russ is part time, and then Mickey's part time. So there's four of us that have been working together. Yeah. And, you know, all these guys, you know, pretty much was fishing on their own, but, you know, we just kind of come together and try to help each other. And so I already had my business established, everything kind of set up. So it worked out for them to not have to worry about. They're doing kind of like what you're talking about wanting to do. Yeah. They just want to show up and fish, you know. So, but, you know, even though those guys are not on the front page social media all the time, they put in just as much time, work, and effort as I do. So they deserve. And if I could get them to talk, I'd like to get them to come on here, but
they won't talk.
Well, yeah, they're a little bit shy on the mic.
I understand that. All right, Mr. Cowan, go ahead. Mike's yours, buddy.
Okay, well, you can go to my webpage, which is henrycowanflyfishing.com. And or my social media is just at Henry Cowan. And you know, what I'm going to just finish up and say is fly fishing for stripers, fly fishing for anything with gills and a tail to me is going to be fun. And we are blessed here in North Georgia to have 2 Orvis shops, the Fishhawk in Buckhead, Alpharetta Outfitters in Alpharetta, Unicoi Outfitters up in Helen. We have up in Fannin County, we have Cohutta Fishing Company. We are just blessed to have fly shops throughout Georgia where other states are losing their fly shops. We tend to be expanding our fly shops here in North Georgia. And I think that's a wonderful thing. Go out, Orvis offers casting lessons where they'll take you out in the back of their shop and teach you how to do it for free, or go sign up for a class at one of the fly shops and get involved. I don't care if it's for brim or it's for stripers. Just, waving a whippy stick is a lot of fun. And I would encourage everybody to do it. And we have a very tight community. And the one thing I'll say about fly anglers, more than any other angler I've ever met, on whether it's a spin rod guy, a beach guy, a boat guy, a bass fisherman, or this fisherman, if you're on a stream throwing a fly rod and the guy downriver from you or the gal downriver from you is catching fish after fish and you're not, I would bet my bottom dollar they're going to walk up to you and say, why don't you try one of these? Mm-hmm. And that's the way our community is. It's not about me, it's about we. And I would encourage everybody to really try. If you haven't tried fly fishing yet, I mean, shoot, I was even able to get Paul out fly fishing this morning. I hope his boss isn't listening, because he stayed out later than he should. But even Paul hooked into a striper this morning. I won't tell you what happened, but we had a good time. And the last thing I'm going to say is we have some really special guides on Lanier. My only shout out is going to be to my guys like Clay Cunningham from Catching Not Fishing, Captain Mack Farr, Jeff Blair and his stripers, Ron Mullins, the striper experience. These guys, this is my network. And I respect these guys a lot, and they help me a lot when they could be pushing me away and they don't. And I really appreciate, the camaraderie we have amongst us. So that's all I'm going to say. And anybody who's interested, it's on Amazon.
There you go. Yeah,
that's where I bought it.
Little secret for you, Henry. You're going to be adding one more fly shop up here soon.
Oh, we are. Huh?
Yeah, if you get that hint. So we've got enough guys coming up, 53 and all, that fish the Amicalola and stuff. Seems like every 10th person that walks through our door is looking for flies and stuff like that. So we're listening, and we're getting ready to add a little bit of that ourselves. So
Danny,
I'll probably be going. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I'm probably going to be needing some advice from you, in the very near future.
Before you wrap this up, do you want me to give you some breaking news that nobody here is aware of?
Go ahead. Let's do it right here. Breaking news right here on the Fish North Georgia's Livewell.
Okay. I want you to know that one of our very own, who could not make it tonight, Captain Mack Farr, has been nominated for the Georgia Outdoor Hunting, the Georgia Outdoor Writers Hall of Fame, Hunting and Fishing Hall of Fame, has been nominated to go into it. One of our very own, and he is so well deserving. I can't tell you.
Absolutely.
Is that up to a public vote? Where do we vote?
Yeah. How does that work?
Well,
who votes on that?
You can look up the Georgia Outdoor Writers Association and send them an email saying that you heard that his nomination is forthcoming and you'd like to tell them why you think that would be a great choice. And it would be a great choice.
Yeah. Absolutely. So let's make sure we'll get that out tomorrow too, Paul. I guess now that we can do that, we can put it on the group page. Something. We'll get the details.
Absolutely.
We'll do that. So we'll all do our part. And that is a big thing. That is a very big thing.
I'd like to add something to that, just because I'd hope to I've never gotten to meet Mac in person, and I'd hope to meet him and shake his hand and tell him his story. Since I'm a little bit younger, actually one of the first Christmas presents I ever remember getting from my grandpa that really got me into fishing, where he would start taking me trout fishing, was an original VHS tape of Mack Farr soaking salmon eggs on the Chattahoochee whacking trout. And that was literally one of the first things in fishing I remember that got me fired up to get him to take me.
There you go. That's awesome. That is awesome. But it also shows, to get nominated for that, you've got to be a positive influence to make a mark, you know, on the sport and all that. So,
Yeah.
Mac, if you're watching this, congratulations, and we're going to do our part to see if we can get him into the Hall of Fame.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. All right, guys, listen, I'm going to tell you personally from us here at Fish North Georgia, thank you very much for taking some time to show up tonight. And you guys, I love these kind of these shows where I don't have to do a lot of talking because you guys know everything about it and all that. So I enjoyed it. I actually learned some stuff tonight. Henry, of course, it's always good to see you and all that. I'm glad to see you doing well. Love the Georgia hat you got on your head. We even had a comment. Somebody said something. They knew the voice didn't match the hat or something like that in one of the comment sections. So they kind of understood. They were like, once they saw the hat, it made sense and all that.
Danny,
but again,
Danny, the stalk just went in the wrong direction when I was born.
Well, I understand that, but we're blessed to have you and all the information that you guys.
You get a word in edgewise with 2 Yankees.
That's right. I got some Yankees in here, but to me, if you're north of Dahlonega, you're a Yankee. So that, you know, that's just the way it is. But thank you very much, guys, for showing up tonight. It's always a pleasure. And again, guys, we appreciate you taking your time to join us here on the Livewell. Remember, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. And for those that are going to be listening later on iTunes and Spotify, hey, we appreciate you guys too. So you guys go out and enjoy your weekend. I think the rain's going to be out of here tomorrow at some point. It should be a good weekend for fishing. Doesn't matter whether you're brim fishing or you're going for these stripers. Just get out in the outdoors away from inside and enjoy yourselves and understand how blessed you are to be able to do that. So until next week, we'll see you.
Good night, everybody.
No, thank you.